What's going on, everyone? Andres Gamboa here for another episode of the Ponytails Podcast. Welcome, 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 welcome. My guest today is Nathan Terborg. I hope I said that right. Terborg. Yes. Nobody ever says my name right. Nathan, I'm hoping, I'm praying that I'm learning all these pronunciations, but your name is cake compared to some of the European guests that we had. So I'm excited to bring him on here on the screen. But before we get into that, let me tell you guys a little bit about what we do. If this is your first episode, catch you up really quick. So we interview people who, like myself, sold books door to door with a company called Southwestern Advantage for 80 hours a week. These books help families with homework, and they're supposed to help kids get better grades and all this other jazz. And so this company, Southwestern Advantage, hires these college kids and they take them out to go sell these books literally from like Monday through Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. And it's a bananas job. Crazy stories that have come out of it. And we've had people from all sorts of walks of life who have done all sorts of different things since doing this internship, and they've come and told us all of their stories and shared some amazing memories that they have from both their time during the actual experience and beyond. So hopefully you enjoy this. Make sure, if you like what you're doing, if this is the first time, if you're a book person, you're like, holy cow, I didn't know there was a podcast about this. Well, great, welcome. Make sure you hit subscribe down there, or if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, follow, download, yada yada yada. Make so that you can get notifications on every time that we post an episode. We come out every Thursday and Sunday with new episodes. So hopefully you enjoy. We've had some awesome guests, and we are going to continue to have some awesome guests. So thank you for supporting us. Thank you for being here. I'm the host, Andres Gamboa. And while we're doing this, we are a fully monetized podcast. And I love the fact that we're partnering with people who all sold books. So all of our people who are partnering with us, they all did this program as well. And we had them all share some amazing knowledge and some really cool wisdom within their industries about how to be successful in all the different walks of life that we've had. So, for example, Will Metscher, I was like, hey, man, give us some tips. Maybe somebody wants to be a coach. He's in Southwestern Consulting, so he's coaching people on how to be better at their job, essentially. But this applies for anybody who wants to be a coach. So here's Will's advice. Number one, realize that coaches are still broken. The question will be, can you admit that about yourself? Number two, you don't have to know everything to be a great coach. You actually just have to care, ask good questions, and hold people accountable to doing more. And then number three, your clients do not have to be the most driven. Some people are just looking for a better work-life balance or other kinds of ways to excel because they're already doing well in other ways. So just make sure you meet them where they want to be met. Great advice. Another bit of wisdom here is from Quintin Roberts and Cardinal Senior Benefits. They're into the late-term insurance sales, and they're crushing it right now. They're doubling every year, and Quintin was on the show as well, so I would recommend going to check out that episode. But he had some advice for people who are looking to get into the industry of sales. Most people entering insurance focus too much on contract percentages and like the money. Be sure to look at the culture. Take a look at the mentors who are going to be in management. They're going to lead you. And of course, the overall culture of the group. That way you can feel like you're marrying this job instead of have it be like a landing spot for something better. And then one more announcement, and this is from Elevate Wellness. Guys, they're doing the Sizzler Shred. So if you guys just got done selling books and you're going to Sizzler, or even if you're not going to Sizzler, you just want to be part of a competition about being accountable to your health, man, this is it. So you get to enter in this competition. Last year they had like 55 people. They're looking to like double that this year. They're doing great. They give about $4,500 with prizes to the top three, and then like $1,000 donated to the service project that they do. They're looking to double all of those numbers this year to get more competition. It's a lot of fun if you guys want to get serious about your health, your fitness, your meals. Join this competition. If you want more information, there's going to be a link below. You guys can totally join in and compete with a bunch of other book people. Get yourself in the best shape possible, especially if you're going to Sizzler. So that's exciting. More announcements for those guys later on. But for now, let me do some introductions. So Nathan Terborg, he sold for 5 summers. He sold in the golden era, in my opinion, of Southwestern. Well, I guess there was a couple golden eras, but the most recent golden era of Southwestern, which is from 1999 to 2004. Great years. 2001 was when Nebraska was the number one org. Woo! I gotta talk about that. Proud, go Big Red. 04 was a record-breaking year with Dustin Hillis and Dave Brown and Kaya Grady at the time. Hillis, she broke like the week's record. There was so many people producing so many books at that point. So this is a solid time where a lot of really awesome people were doing really great work at the company. He was part of the JYD organization, Junkyard Dogs, or whatever the heck you guys did. He went to the University of Minnesota, also Concordia College, and was originally from Princeton, Minnesota. Now currently lives in Minneapolis. And his Instagram, you can actually check it out if you want to get a hold of him. And we'll be periodically posting this. So if you missed it this time, that's totally cool. But his Instagram is Nathan Terborg. That's NATHANTERBORG, not TRETERBORG. You can go check out some of his stuff and what he's up to. Yeah, last but not least, his favorite scroll is scroll number 5, which I think he's the third person that's chosen this at this point. I don't know. I've lost count. But it's I will live this day as if it is my last, which I mean, what wonderful words of wisdom from Agmendino there. Glad he liked that one. So when we return, Nathan Terborg.
Ponytails Podcast. Here we go.
Rolling. How's it going, man?
Phenomenal. How are you?
Taking over the world.
And here we are. You still have time for this. That's fantastic.
You know, I've said this before on the air, but if you want to take over the world, you got to take over yourself first.
Amen.
So I figured I'd take a solid 80 years to do that, and then I'll check out Canada
Smart.
afterwards.
Smart.
So heck yeah, man, dude. So glad to have you. You've actually been. I don't think I mentioned this in the green room, but you've actually been recommended by multiple people.
Oh boy.
To be on the show. The most recent was Mikolai.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just recording with him a few days ago, and he's like, "Dude, do you have Nathan?" I'm like, "Yeah, he's actually on Thursday." He's like, "Dude, you're gonna have a blast." So I was like, "All right, cool. I have a blast every time." But I'm so excited, man. Dude, I'm super happy to have you here. Usually we just start it and we just dive right on into the thing. Catch me up. We can either catch up on what you've been up to since 04 till now and what you're doing now, or reverse. What are you up to now? And then we can catch up on the years before. The mic is yours. Let us know.
Beautiful. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on. And so catching you up, I mean, in the 17 minutes that we've known each other, a lot's happened. No, so I sold from you wouldn't believe what's going on here in the last 17 minutes. It's wild.
Time flies.
So I'll start from the current and work. I'll start from present day and work backwards. So I'm a full-time artist. And I have been so for about the last year and a half. Before that, I worked with Globe Life Family Heritage, which is what I did not pretty much, but exactly from when I left the bookfield up until the end of 2020. So that is the quick and dirty version of it. I sold from 99 to 2004, and I credit my time selling books door to door with almost, everything that is my life today, to be at the risk of hyperbole, but yeah, for sure.
That's pretty crazy. So hold on. Full-time artist. I mean, I think we've had Marty Pyle on here, and he's a full-time artist. And then I can't remember. We probably have 154 episodes at this point. I kind of blot out, but how the heck? That's hard to do, man. It's hard to be an aspiring artist, and then from that to like, hey, this is what I do full-time. How did you achieve this? If we have some people listening who want to pursue their art in whatever form, what were some like wisdom things that you learned along the way?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I mean this covers both sides of the coin, but the way I like to explain it to people that aren't familiar with direct sales and what Southwestern and frankly what comes after that can make possible is that my past self was the patron for my current self. In other words, everything that I did before has given me tremendous flexibility and freedoms to do things that I certainly would not have the ability to do if I was just, starting from scratch.
Fair enough. And I mean, I'm assuming this is your art here behind you.
It is, yeah.
That's so cool. So it's visual art. That's kind of like, tell me a little bit about these pieces and like kind of your process overall.
Yeah, sure. So this is, I'm an abstract artist. I work with a lot of repurposed materials. So let me see here if I can point over my shoulder.
I'll do this. Let me try this really quick. Wait, other way around. Try to flip you over.
Oh,
so that
beautiful.
you're bigger
Thank you.
and people can see you. There we go.
Nice. And my hands are pointing in the right direction. I love it. All
Look at
right, cool.
If you look to my upper left.
Yeah, so these are I work with a lot of repurposed materials, so I do a lot of carving and burning and misusing a lot of different materials for different reasons. So like this, for example, was a packing crate. So my studio here is in an industrial
Whoa.
space, so I get a lot of material that would have otherwise been thrown away. This one, there we go. This guy has got a lot of plastic, a lot of things that I don't exactly dumpster dive, but I've got a lot of friends, other businesses in the area that are happy to throw what would otherwise be just discarded waste that I either melt or use resin to secure into different things. So that's
That
what I
is
do.
so. How long does that take you to make? Like that one to your up behind to your right.
This
That
one,
one, like
yeah.
from like when it was trash. Oh, Margie Medina also does something similar. She calls it "It's Not Trash," but from when it was trash
Yeah,
to this beautiful piece of art hanging in your studio.
that's
What was
actually
that
probably
process like?
that's a pretty good. That one's probably a good example. The outside of that was, like I said, a packing crate. I don't know why I can't get my hands to work right. There it is. Was a packing crate, and so that's like MDF, which is the same material as like cabinets or a lot of furniture is made from. It's called an abbreviation for medium density fiberboard. It's basically just sawdust that's been glued together, and it's very, very stable and it doesn't warp. So that's the outside, and then what's on you can't really see it on here, but if you go to my Instagram, you certainly can. But the inside layer, there's a lot of holes in my work, and that reveals kind of what's inside. And what's inside of that one is a light box that's been spray painted black, and then I wrote a poem around kind of the inspiration for that piece. That's written kind of underneath, to where if you peek through and explore, you can see little bits and pieces of it. So, but yeah, I didn't answer your question at all. To answer your question, in terms of hours, is I don't know. I really don't track it. I mean, some work comes together fairly quickly, and some pieces will sit around in my studio for weeks, sometimes months. I'm very all over the place, ADD, what have you. So I have found that I am best creatively when I've got at least 8, if not 12 or 15 pieces going at any given time. So some of them I'll rock and roll from start to finish. Others I'll just kind of have to sit with and chip away at. So it's hard to get an exact, time estimation as to how long, each one takes, but anywhere from, I don't know, 20 to maybe 50 hours, depending upon how involved it is and how much I second guess myself, redo stuff.
Well, we'll get into that in just a sec. That's an interesting point there, but I wanted to share this too. This is your Instagram right here. If you guys are listening, and I apologize if you should, if you're on Spotify, you can actually turn on the video, and then if you want to go check it out on YouTube after you're done, or if you have the time, we're 13 minutes in, you can see some of this stuff. So this is your Instagram page right here, 20,000 followers. Yep. Look, you go, heck yeah, man. And then we got some of these amazing. Look at this. This is beautiful. Wow, look at this. This is a video, and this is you working.
Yeah, that's a process video.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, I do a lot of power carving, and actually, that's kind of a funny example. So that would be a lot of. We can talk more about that if you want, but a lot of the mindset around a creative practice are principles that I certainly was exposed to and drilled down in a very deep and meaningful way through my experience with Southwestern. That might not be the most interesting process video, but that's a lot of what I do. Yeah, I put a lot of work in progress type stuff. What would be a good example of a start to finish? If you want to scroll down to,
look at your dog.
Click on go back up. I'm going to point at my screen like you can see it. Stop right there. The one on the far. Nope, one layer down.
Oh, this one.
Yep, the one on the far right. Nope. Oh, yeah, that one's fine too.
Okay,
that's kind of a good example of like a start to finish, video of carving, and then I think there's some burning. Yeah, there it is. There's
this
the torch.
Is so cool.
Yeah.
Yo, you are a master, man. This is so awesome.
I'm definitely not. I am I take a lot of pride in being a self-professed amateur, but thank you. No, thanks for saying. In the spirit you intended it. Thank you.
A person that draws stick figures is an amateur. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't do
Sure.
this.
Yeah.
Listen, someone put a gun to my head and was like, "Hey, you need to make up an hour speech about some bullshit." I could do that and save my life. You know what I'm saying? That's my strength. If someone
Yeah.
was saying me to be like, "You need to make this, or we're gonna kill you," I'm like, I would rather just die without the hour of anxiety because I can't do this. This is
Yeah.
amazing, man. Look at
Thank you.
this.
I
This is
appreciate it.
crazy. Wow. So where did you like? I guess the real question is where did you start? Like, how did this begin for you as far as like wanting to become an artist? How long have you been like? Because this seems to be a very strong passion. You're good at it. When you're this good at something, it's got to be a passion. When did it start? Was it something that you learned, or was it like when you were 4, you were like doing cool stuff with Legos or some shit like that? Like,
So I've always been a creative kid for sure. Like saying, and I'm very fortunate to have had parents who were very supportive of my, creative pursuits and desire just to make stuff. Like I've always just really enjoyed making things from like the first time my, grandpa gave me a pocket knife and I was able to, whittle a sharp end of a stick. I was like, oh, I made this, right? So there's
that's
something
cool.
very, very tactile about like knowing that something that was previously just in my head, or really more of my work now, just sort of happens organically through the process. Right? I'm responding and reacting to whatever it is that's in front of me, and just making messes and hopefully resolving them, in visually interesting and meaningful ways. So, yeah, I've just always had kind of that in me. And I majored and minored in a number of different degrees while I was in college, none of which were realized. But minoring in art was one of those things. And then once I got into business, after leaving Southwestern, I pretty much just for about 20 years or so, I pretty much just made very elaborate pumpkins carvings with my 2 daughters, and very elaborate Easter eggs. That was another chance for me to flex my creative muscles and say, hey, look at just feel good about having made something. And then when I decided to transition out of business at the end of 2020, I knew I wanted to put myself in a position where I could just make things all the time. And so that led to me starting to paint again. And then from there, I kind of reconnected to my love of just working with wood. And that's kind of brought me to where I'm at today. So I think if I have any natural strengths, it would be curiosity. I am insatiably curious, and I think that's probably one of the qualities that I find most interesting in other human beings as well, is just a curiosity. It's funny, once you start to listen to it, people that are highly accomplished, highly evolved, intelligent, whatever it might be, they use that curiosity word a lot. I'm not claiming to be any of those things, by the way, but it is something that you hear a lot, when you hear people talk about. And then I was curious. A lot of great ideas, come from just curiosity. So my artistic practice today is built around just chasing my curiosity. And I found that the shorter the distance from, what if to why not, the better off I am, creatively. Because, even if it doesn't work, it still leads me down a path of something that will at some point. And that just comes from that belief of like, even if it doesn't work out today, it's leading me in a direction that will at some point.
Yeah, it's another step on the journey of wherever I'm going, which might not be as clear. Which is part of like making art,
Yeah.
which is it's micro steps of a bigger thing that's the same idea. So okay, so many questions, man. This is so cool. I think this is so cool because I suck at art. Like I'm not good at any of this, like this kind of stuff. This creative. I'm creative in other ways. This is not one of them. So I'm so fascinated by people like you who can do this kind of stuff. So I hope you don't mind, but we are here.
Not at all. We're here talking. Let's do it.
Well, couple of things along the journey. I have like 4 stacks of questions I gotta memorize. Make sure I don't. Okay, I got it. Along the way, at some point, it goes from something that you are good at, I enjoy, to I am going to jump full time and feed my family with this, like, or you know what I'm saying, or like this is going to be I'm comfortable, whether it's financially or confidently, like just inside, emotionally. What do you think that moment was for you when you're like, you know what, I got to do this. I got to pursue this, and how did you make that decision?
Yeah, so it really comes down to when my dad passed away. To be honest, I mean that's really was the impetus
Oh,
that really got me thinking about, am I doing what I was put here for? So, my dad passed away about 4 years ago,
oh,
and when
sorry,
he
man.
when he did, oh, thank you. When he did, as we were preparing for the funeral, we're sorting through all the photographs and putting the memorial, display together as one does, and we came across some pictures of him acting in some. He loved like doing sketches at church or small community plays. He was in a couple productions, and he just loved it. And that was one of the things that he was really excited about doing once he retired and once he got to his golden years and had the ability to spend more time doing things other than working. Well, he was only 62 when he passed away, and so
Oh,
he never got a chance to fully, pursue what was his passion. He was in social work, and he had a career that was, certainly of service, right? Like he made a difference, and enjoyed and took great pride in the service that he provided to the people that he worked with, but it wasn't his passion, and so
mm,
that's kind of what got the wheels turning for me. Was just thinking about, what if I didn't have to wait? What if I didn't have to wait until I was whatever, 60, 65, or, in my golden years to pull out the old easel and start to make stuff again. And that's kind of what got the gears turning to consider what it would look like to transition, out of my business and position myself to be able to do this.
whoa, that's a jolt. The mortality of your parents. It really makes you wake up a little bit. Yeah,
Yep.
it's been a weird theme the last few episodes. There's been a lot of people who've lost their parents. You think you're the third one now in the last five that we've done. And they all said the same thing. Like when obviously it's a traumatic moment, but they rose from those ashes really really well, and then just
It's
kind of
interesting. So I'm glad you brought that up. Sorry to cut you off. This is
no,
actually a
please
really
do.
interesting thing. This is something that, to kind of bring things full circle and talk about the book experience. I think that one of the things that I think the my experience with the Southwestern really started to um, expose me to and get me to thinking about was the fact that we get to assign meaning to the things that happen to us, right? So there's the
Yeah,
victim mentality of, oh, this happened to me, which is the least empowering position that a person could have about any given situation. I'm a victim. It's happening to me. Woe is me. What can I do? Right. And so one of the things that we learned for sure, if you were paying attention from, the book field, was you get to decide how to feel or how to act about something, right? What to do with those feelings, what to do with the, Mr. Mediocrity or whatever voice, that our
yeah.
mind might be telling us to, hey, take the easy way. Let's get comfortable. Let's stay safe. And so I think that just having that perspective of understanding that, okay, this happened, but being able to assign meaning to, all right, what do I do with it now? And I've had some other experiences that I'm happy to discuss as well that certainly fall in that category, from losing my sister at a fairly young age to my experience with
Dude,
drug addiction and recovery. And I'll probably talk about that in a little bit if you want. But those are all
yeah.
things that really
This
kind of anchor that mentality of like, okay, this happened. Some of it happened to me. Some of it was self-imposed, like my experience with addiction. But we get to decide what it means. We get to assign the meaning to it, and then we get to decide, okay, now what? What do I do with that? Right. So back to my dad, to kind of put a bow on that. It would have been one thing to reflect introspectively around like, okay, I lost my parent. Now what? But I think that one of the things that my experience with Southwestern really helped prepare me for was developing the mental and emotional muscles around processing something and then taking meaningful action towards whatever that takeaway might have been.
glorious, dude. This is oh man, you said so many things there that yes, we definitely have to dig into some of these, and because there's a lot of lessons that you've learned, obviously, clearly, uh, here. Um, oh, okay, man, I have so many questions. Okay, next thing I was curious about. Let's stick with this art, and then we'll go back to your rise out of addiction, and we'll
Sure.
go into like how to defeat your demons, because I feel
Yeah.
like that deserves its own kind of like
Mm.
moment to talk about.
Hmm.
Um, This question has to do with like value. Now, if you don't want to answer this part, that's okay. But like generally speaking, when you see art this beautiful and this like intricately made, it's not like you're. I mean, all art's beautiful, right? But you have to put a price tag on this so you could sell it, right? This is like so people can be like, I want to purchase this, and I'm assuming it's not. I mean, what is like your pricing range? And the real reason I'm asking this is not necessarily because like how much do you charge? I don't really. That's not really the important part. I'm assuming it's a good chunk. The part I want to kind of get to is the maybe almost like an imposter syndrome or like this feeling of insecurity of like people who are out in their business who are producing products. In your case, it's art. In my case, it's ad space or whatever a service that we provide here. Or if other people are listening to this and they also uh, have a friend who just launched a swimsuit line, right? Like, how do you feel confident that this is what it's worth without feeling or how do I avoid the feeling of like, oh man, why would people pay me this much for,
Hmm.
because we're all insecure, right? Like,
Yeah.
how did you come to that, and how did you like not convince yourself, but make yourself understand, you know what? No, I do deserve, whatever this costs. So can you navigate us through that?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's funny when you say when you feel confident. I would say that in the macro, I'm fairly confident in the
Sure.
grand scheme of things, right? In the long term. In the micro, situationally, I rarely feel confident. You know what I
Same,
mean?
dude. Same.
And part of that's just like self-awareness. I think that's part of the benefit of being, middle aged as I now am and having the benefit of a little perspective. But to realize and acknowledge like I don't feel fully confident. And oh, by the way, that's okay. Because nobody knows what the F they're doing. Like
Yeah.
nobody. And I think it's
From
really
the
important to
president
listen to
down,
podcasts and
nobody knows.
100%.
Yeah.
So it's really important just to acknowledge like nobody knows, everyone's making it up as they go. Some people are just doing it at a higher level, than others. But if you really ask, and I've been very blessed and fortunate to be around some top performers as we get to, through Southwestern and since then. And my favorite people are the ones who are confident enough to boldly take action on something that might not work, but who are also humble enough to acknowledge, their shortcomings and still take action in spite of the fact that they are not completely confident. Like I could list them off. I only know a handful of like purely confident people who are just like, yep, I'm here. This is what I'm doing. It's going to work out because I'm here and it's me. you know, the
Yeah.
rest of us mortals, of which
Yeah, those
I,
people are
I,
freaks. I mean,
I
in a good
certainly,
way, but yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
And you've had a couple
Yeah.
of them on that I
Yeah.
would say, yeah, they're
Like
probably in
your
that
Dave
category.
Rosens, you're like, you're just
Sure.
gonna succeed at whatever the fuck you want to do.
That's
It's
right.
gonna be good. Yeah.
The other
Yeah.
98% of us,
Yes.
struggle with self-doubt, struggle with that imposter syndrome. And I will say that I still struggle with that today for sure in the art space, because who the hell am I? I'm just a guy that happened to have some success, in a completely different space in business. And which has afforded me the ability to have a massive studio, the ability to, and frankly, a skill set that I wouldn't have had I not had that experience, with sales
Right.
and with business. So I don't know if I answered your question at all, but those are some words that I've now said, and you can tell me how close I
No,
got.
yeah, that's good. That's good. And I can dig deeper if that's cool. Like, do you
Mhm.
mind if I dig a little more on this? So, like, I guess let's go back to like, I'll say it this way. And again, you don't have to tell us what your art's worth. I'm just saying, like, at some point, you were like, I'm going to charge $5,000 for this. I don't know
Mhm.
if that's what you charge or not, but whatever, or $500 for this.
Yeah.
And you had to been like, shit, who would pay 5,000 for this? Like, I know what's wrong with it. Like, I'll speak from my experience first, so that way to kind of help understand relate. But like, when we first got monetized on the podcast,
Yeah.
um, we were doing this as a hobby. It was just something that we were just on the weekend that we had available. We'd just go
Mhm.
live. It was a different time of the day every time. We had no structure, which is okay because we were just fucking around, right?
Yeah.
And then we started getting emails and messages from companies that weren't Southwestern related that were like, "Hey, you're getting enough views that we want to like put our product with you or have you talk about our thing. Would you be open for that?" And that's when we first go, oh, well, maybe we're onto something, right? And every week, to every day, every week, every month, we got more listeners. But it wasn't like we're not Joe Rogan, right? And that's what I'm comparing, or whatever, Crime Junkie. Pick your favorite podcast,
Yeah.
Tim Ferriss,
Yeah.
right? We're not these millions of listeners a day, right? Type of people, and And so then, I'm sitting down with Pat Roach, for example. He was the first person, one of the first few people who were like, "Hey, I'll give you money, like if you want to talk about my company or me, or not." He's not me, like about what we do and see if people want to come work here. And like,
That would be an odd ad spot if you're like, hey, Pat Roach, really good guy.
yeah, no.
All right.
And he's like,
Next
he
sponsor.
specifically was like, please don't mention me that much. Pat Roach is like one of those people that just does well at everything. Another one of those 2%.
Yeah.
And he's like, just don't talk about me. Just talk about our company and the opportunity, because I believe in that. And I'm like, okay,
Yep.
cool. So, but anyway, the point is, like, I was like, how much do I charge? I looked up how much a podcast should charge based on niche. I did all this research and I said, hey, I feel comfortable telling you this number. But inside I was like, why is that too much to add? Like,
Yeah.
that moment, the first one.
Yeah.
Later on, we
Yep.
got contracts that were 4 times as big, probably, right? Because we had way more views and we had kept growing. But and even at that point, I was like, oh, am I really doing? There's every day I always have a moment where like, is this important? Do people really give a shit? Are people really like caring about what we're doing here? And there's like that like imposter syndrome a little bit there, where it's like, on the one hand, hey, this is a great conversation. This is an incredible thing for anybody to be listening to, because you have a lot to teach us and you've had experiences that people can learn from. So that's where I'm confident is in our guests and their abilities. But then sometimes I wake up and I'm like, my brother doesn't even listen to this. Why would anybody else give a shit? And
Right.
he's a DSM or whatever.
Yep.
So like, man, how do you battle that with your art? Because I'm imagine it has to feel the same kind of when you're like working on a piece of wood and you're like, this is just a piece of wood that I did something with, and like, why would people pay me for this? Like,
So there's two parts of that for sure.
Right.
100%. Yeah. I think, so one of the things that, there's one very, very distinct similarity and one distinct difference between what you just described and mine. One is that, there is an objective value for ad space, right? So like you said, like you did some homework and looked up, like based on X views, of course, who knows what the conversion is going to be based on the spot and if it's a fit, blah, blah, blah. But, there's at least a starting point or a baseline for, hey, this objectively is worth, X
a relative
amount, right?
gauge. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, art is as subjective as it gets, right? So there are art pieces that are both like bigger and smaller than these that have gone for $50 and some that have gone for $50 million, right? So how do we decide what it's, what it's worth? So I would say that for sure my first few pieces that I sold, I was like, oh wow, someone's really going to pay me like real money for something that I just kind of made out of trash with my own hands. So there's a proof of concept, like, and thankfully I'm at that point now where I've sold enough work to have a baseline for like, oh wow, okay, people actually will pay this. And then as time goes on, in theory, assuming that I continue to progress at the rate that I'd like to, that value will increase. But yeah, for sure, there was that first moment where I was like, oh, let's go. Now, this is where this is something else I'm excited to talk about with you, which is the value of mentorship. I think that's one of the other really big, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to answer your question directly.
No, that's fine. No,
but the value
good,
of mentorship,
it's all good,
is, I think it's something that I feel like there's a lot of adults that there's plenty of ways to acquire an appreciation for the value of having quality mentors, of course. But for those of us that sold books and had that experience, I think it's kind of just baked into our DNA. Like when you're in that sink or swim, world where it's like, I literally, if I don't get help with this, I'm not going to make it. You realize real quick, like, oh, wow, okay. Mentorship is absolutely critical. Like I have to have people around me that I can ask questions of, who have had a similar or same experience, who can tell me it's going to be okay, who can give me advice on how to proceed when I'm freaking clueless on what to do next. And fortunately, I've had that in the art space as well. Again, back to because I had that in me to seek out mentors and to really take advantage of them, which is something that in a positive way. But that's something that most people don't do. They don't know how to ask for a mentor or how to really utilize someone who's willing to share their wisdom and their expertise. Something we can come back to if you want. Yes, but in the art space, because of my understanding of how critical it is to have not just a mentor, but mentors plural, because good luck finding somebody who's checking the boxes in all of your, whatever, 5 to 9 key areas of your life that you want to be successful in. But to seek that out and to really take advantage of that. So I've got a primary mentor in the art space who's been absolutely critical in helping me navigate a lot of these early questions, such as how much should I charge for my work? And so he was able to help me with a price per square inch, price per square foot, round up, round down, based on, in my case, how sculptural it is, or is it framed? There we go. I still can't get this right. Is it framed? Is it not framed? Whatever. And so that helped me kind of establish a baseline for pricing.
Beautiful. This is great. This is great stuff. The the art that you produce, as you're looking at it, what's the goal now? Because so you started, you had this moment, your first one sold, your first few sold. Now you have a studio, you have stuff going on. 10 years down, where's you mentioned about your projection of how you're growing and stuff. What's the North Star here?
Yeah, so I mean, I've got about as ambitious as goals as ambitious of goals as a person would have, in the art space. I'd like to ultimately be represented by, blue chip galleries in New York and LA and, Milan and Berlin and London, et cetera. I'd like to have my work hung in museums, now there's
So cool.
a point of a percentage. If Vegas was casting odds on the likelihood of that happening, it is astronomically, low. But I'm okay with that, because obviously the journey is the destination, and I'm curious about who I'll become in the process, how my work will progress. And if there's one thing that that God has shown me up to this point, it's that my plans are all well and good, but highly unlikely to come to pass, and almost always, scratch that, always for the better, right? God's plan for me is better than any plan that I could have had for myself. So I'm comfortable kind of living in that space of, I've got ambitious goals, things that I write down, goals that I have, things that I visualize on a daily basis. But I'm also completely open to the fact that I don't know what the hell I'm doing or how things are supposed to go.
Yeah, I understand that. It's oftentimes you're like, and I will say this for you, because people forget, like, you always feel like you don't know what you're doing, because you're still chasing something bigger, something better, some improvement. And so you're never going to, because you're chasing to improve, you're always going to feel like it's not good enough, but you're not there yet.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? And then all of a sudden you look back and, oh, actually I'm a master at this craft. We were talking about comedy earlier, and I'm like, I guarantee you that's what Dave Chappelle feels like. He's like, I'm pretty good at this comedy thing, but I still want to be like this, and he's not there yet. So he still feels like,
yeah,
he doesn't know what he's doing, like, because nobody's been there before, or like, I guess you haven't been there before, so it just feels like you're not. It feels like your first door every time.
That's right.
Even though you've been to 1,000 doors.
I mean, a true master. I'm trying to think of if this is. Yeah, no, I feel good about saying this. A true master would never say that they are, right. Just like somebody who's enlightened, let's say, would say, "Hey, guess what, guys? Turns out I'm enlightened now," right? Like, so I think that's part of it, right? Is getting to that level of whatever, to that elite, level. It is the process, and it is acknowledging, like, the more you know, the more you realize you don't, right?
But you are the metaphor of your art, right? Like, you started out as this like thing that maybe, hey, people didn't see value in, but you saw value in it, and then you started carving it out, and you're making your way, and eventually it'll be, to me, like, I see all art, your face and your art, all the same. You're there, man. You're crushing it. There's
Thank
people
you.
that
I
wish you were
appreciate it.
there, right? But in your head,
Yeah, I
you're
mean,
like, the Louvre is where this belongs. And I'm not gonna, until I'm dead, I'm gonna keep chasing this goal. And that's amazing. That's beautiful.
it is. Yeah, I mean, I think, it's one of the things that art has made possible for me is it's given me a language to communicate around things emotionally that I'm fairly stunted in verbally, right? I can talk, but as far as actually processing in real time, what I'm feeling and what to do with those, thoughts or emotions, I am pretty stunted. Like, if my wife was here, she would reinforce that fairly. But what art has done is given me a chance to really, process a lot of things that's happened in my life so far, and also my experience in the world, right now. So one of my one of the themes around, my work is that our scars are our superpowers. So, again, whether they be self-inflicted or whether they were inflicted upon us, the darkest, most challenging times that we have been through actually give us the ability, the strength, the power, the voice to have more influence in a good way, to be of service more, and frankly, just to have more to say. I mean, my favorite people have been through some shit without fail. My favorite people, and think about my favorite thinkers, my favorite authors, whoever it might be, they've been through some things, and they're willing to be vulnerable about those things. They're willing to not hide those scars and say, oh, don't look over here because this part's ugly, but they're willing to say, here it is, and it's that same, I said this in conversation the other day, and I was like, I'm gonna write that down. But our cape is also our kryptonite, or vice versa. Our kryptonite's also our cape, right? Like our biggest weaknesses can also become some of our biggest strengths. So that's kind of what I'm doing with my work, is really exploring like how, again, discarded material that would otherwise be set aside or thrown away, how I can burn it and carve it and really put it through the ringer, really figure out, like, trying to get down to the essence of what the material is, and find the beauty in that and find the interest in that and tell a story around that. That's what I'm aiming at, and once in a great while I'm successful.
I feel like you're gonna give yourself. I'm gonna give you more credit. You're pretty successful, man. That's awesome. Wow. Okay. Last question about art, unless more stuff comes up, and then we can jump into like
Sure.
some of the things you've overcome.
Yeah.
Is who do you who is, like, you just kind of mentioned this, like your idols in art? Who are like we talked about comedy and the people I look up to, right? Like
Yeah.
your CKs and your Mark Normans and your Tom
Yep.
Segura's. But for you, who are those people in the art world?
Yeah, I mean, I could go off for a while on that. I mean, my Mount Rushmore of like living artists, number one's going to be Mark Bradford. So if you're interested in, I mean, he's an absolute, yeah. So he would be one. Julie Meritou is another. Her work is absolutely extraordinary and just blows me away. Ansem Kiefer, German artist, who's absolutely extraordinary. I mean, I could go on for a while with a bunch of names that probably no one or very few of your guests or audience would recognize, but
Okay.
I think it's important to have, like, it's really important to have, I think, examples of whatever you're trying to do, right? People that have done or are doing what you're aspiring to. And I kind of back to what I was saying before, realizing as well that they're just people too. They're just people too, right? Like there's a really good chance that I don't happen to know this about any of the names that I just listed off, but I happen to know this about people in general. There's a really good chance that whoever it is that you might be idolizing or looking to as an example of what success might be in that particular space, there's a really good chance that they woke up this morning doubting themselves, saying, what's the point? Or what the hell am I going to do today that's actually going to make a difference? And that to me is one of the most encouraging things that we could really, hold true and keep in mind, is like, it's not easy for anybody. I mean, there's a few unicorns, that's great, good for them, but for the overwhelming majority of the rest of us, and oh, by the way, most of the people who are wildly successful in, again, fill in the blank, whatever space that you aspire to be successful in, are waking up every day having to fight those same battles and figure out how they're going to overcome that imposter syndrome, that self-doubt, that, fill in the blank, the same way you do, which means it's possible, which means that, you, me, and everybody else can do it as well.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. They're all taking painful poops.
Yeah.
My wife said this the other day. She was talking about, like, she's like, the other day I thought, I was like, Elon Musk seems like such a crazy human being, but no matter how much money you have or how successful you are, you still have to wipe your own butt.
That's right.
You can't have enough money to have someone else do it. That's weird. I mean, I'm sure there's people that do that, but like,
if we want to talk about that, we can. I don't know why the bidet has not caught on in the U.S. more than that. Like you really, you kind of don't have to.
We were a Bizzler. We were a Bizzler, and we had a bidet, and I was like, "Whoa,
it makes all the sense in the world. Why do we not all have one?"
And you can turn it warmer if you want to shock yourself.
Totally.
You can do cold bidet. Yeah, it's a whole thing.
I think you got the title of this episode.
That's fair enough. No, man,
Market.
on a serious note, the wisdom that you're sharing as far as like saying like, hey, like these people are incredible at their craft, but they're just people.
Yeah.
Which means that, you know, there's and I'm gonna put this here too, just because we're having a conversation and it's our conversation, we can talk about whatever we want, right? Um, have you read the book? It's called Happiness Advantage. I
You
think it's
know,
called.
I haven't, but you're not the first person to bring it up to me.
Yeah, highly recommend. Sean Acor, and he talks about um
I have
basically kind
watched
of
his
like,
TED Talk. I think the TED Talk
yeah,
was what inspired the
phenomenal.
book. So I'm familiar with his
Yes,
thought
the
process.
unicorn,
Yeah, yeah,
his
yeah.
sister, the unicorn,
Yeah.
or whatever, and he talks about how like we focus on like to when people are sad, depressed, addicted, or whatever to things, like the idea is to bring them back to normal, but there's nobody's ever studying how to like go from normal to like happy, like to get
Hmm.
to the other way. And so anyway, in one section of this book, it's really interesting. You don't even have to read the whole thing, but every part is interesting. But this particular section really like put into question for me what I had always believed about like talent and skill and like, kind of like what you're saying, where it's like you look at someone like LeBron James, right? And you're like, oh, I could never dunk a basketball. When it's like, okay, sure, just because I'm not the height, but like, could you ever be that good at basketball? And people would be like, no, it's just natural born talent with hard work. And then even if you work hard, you didn't have his talent. So, but then in the book, he actually argues that there's maybe some things that actually you can actually achieve enough. So the example that he gave, and this is super interesting, is he talked about how people they did a study on people who became blind. They weren't born blind. They were had normal lives and then accident and then lost their sight.
Hmm.
And so they had to learn how to read Braille. And so, you know, and like, you know, they usually tip if they're right-handed, they use the right-handed, like read the Braille, blah, 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 and then yada, yada, yada. Well, they analyze these people's brain. They put them under an MRI scan or whatever, the thing that shows up, lights up your brain activity while you're doing stuff. And they took a look at like at their finger that they used there to read Braille, and they took a look at their finger that was still quote unquote normal from before the accident. When they put it on the normal one, just simple like every other finger, but when they put it on, obviously when they put it on the Braille finger, the brain just lit up like a Christmas tree, which shows that if in need or if you practice quote unquote enough, like your brain will actually change its like biology and physiological composition to accommodate for you to be able to do that skill. So like it almost like it created that talent to be able to read the Braille, so you could actually like so the reason I thought of this is because you talked about like someone listening to this might be like, well, yeah, but this person, this artist, right, they have this amazing skill and I don't have that talent, so even if I tried and practice every day, I could never be that good. And it's like, actually, based on that, yeah, you can totally become that. It might mean that you might have to work harder than them, sure, but that's still under your control. So when you have something like that and you look at people who have done it like you're talking about, it is very, very, very much possible that you can. Again, there's limits, right? Like you can't run as fast as Usain Bolt if you break both your legs and are paralyzed forever. There's exceptions to all the rules. I'm talking
Sure.
about just like being good at chess, for example, or being able to like these things that you see people do, these feats that you see people do. You're like, I could never do that because I'm too blah. It's like, no, you can. You actually can. It's just, are you willing to put in that time, the dedication, the effort, the blood, sweat, and tears, right? And that sounds so cliche to say, but there's scientific proof. You can do it. You can do it. Fucking go do it then. You know?
Yeah, I
Not
mean,
me.
it's a 10,000 hour rule, right? It's like, I think
Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, and to be, you're exactly right. I mean, to be fair, like, you know, LeBron was born, you know, not, he wasn't born 6'8", 270. His mom probably wouldn't have done too well with that. But I mean,
Right. Yeah.
to
She
have
would have had
his
her problems.
physical, have his physical skill set is extraordinary. But let's talk about basketball, right? Like there's the most talented, you know, basketball players in the world. Very few of them have actually made it to the NBA, right? Why?
Yeah.
Well, opportunity probably in some cases, but in most cases, probably just an unwillingness to continue working the way that like LeBron, you know, does, for example. And I think it's funny. So here we are on ponytails. I've used this example a number of times in talks and whatnot with people, but I think that apart from obvious physical exemptions, right? Like I'm 6'5", right? Like I'm never going to be a horse jockey. I'm not going to be a good one. I can't
Right.
will
Yeah.
myself to be 5'4" and,
Yeah.
117
Yeah.
pounds. But apart from those obvious, physical requirements for certain things, I think that pretty much anything can be learned or accelerated in many for sure cases to an elite level. The question is, do you love it enough to stick with it for those 10,000 hours or however long it's
Right.
going to take, to be good? And you know this from comedy, right? Like, what do they say? It's 10 years, before somebody really
Oh,
comes
yeah.
into their own, right?
Yeah, you get your exceptions, but yes, generally speaking, if you haven't even paid the dues for 10 years, don't expect the Netflix special.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Right. My favorite book on this topic is a book called Grit by Angela Duckworth. Are you familiar with it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I haven't read it, but that's on my list. I had a couple guests recommend that to me as well. Yes. But go on,
It's
please.
exceptional. And so the whole idea, and it's been a while since I read it, but the whole idea is that, talent is in the equation somewhere. But the actual skill comes from the effort and the time, right? The time magnifies or multiplies the result that somebody's going to get. So yeah, it kind of debunks the whole, talent myth that people were just born, just born with it, right? The whole, overnight success, like that's not the deal
No,
for
it
very
never
few.
works that way. I
Yeah.
mean, it's rare. Speaking of like comedians, like I think John Mulaney is the only one I can think of. If I'm not this could be wrong, so don't quote me on this, but I believe it was like he was 4 years into his career before he had like a 30-minute special on Comedy Central or something, and then like a year later he did his first Netflix, and it was like, but it was just so like out of like he was just that's so rare to find, and a lot of it probably had to do with like besides this really talented person, like being at the right place at the right time also helps,
Yeah.
like you said, like the opportunity, but still there is something to be that. Now another aspect of this, and this is kind of a good way to circle back to something you brought up earlier that we said we were going to come back to, is mentorship too, right? Is you have the talent, you have the dedication, the will. The next part, and I think could also make a giant difference, is the idea of finding someone who's been where you want to go,
Yeah.
and then asking them for that advice to help you avoid the mistakes that could maybe help you save that time. So you're still putting in all the effort, that you need, but then you can avoid silly mistakes. So if I want to swing a golf club like Tiger Woods, I could probably figure it out in 30 years, right? But if I had a coach, maybe it only takes me 10, because they can like go, hey, don't do this, or keep your legs bent, or you know what I'm saying? So on that, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned people don't know how to find a good mentor. What are some ways that you think, if you were going to coach, if you're going to mentor people on finding mentors, what are some things that like, here's how you find someone? For me, for example, like I can't just go up to Joe Rogan and say, hey, how do I build my podcast to be bigger, right? So
Right.
what do you recommend on finding a good mentor you can trust, that you can rely on, that you can learn from?
It's good. I've never thought about sort of breaking it down, so this will be my first crack at it in real time. But I would say that, so I would say step one would probably have to be pay attention and realize that, mentorship is going to come from places that you may not expect it. I think that if there's any benefit, and I think there's actually a lot of benefits to being, ADD, ADHD, but it's
Yeah.
the radar is always up for different things, and it's, the ability, or again, blessing and curse, to make connections between seemingly disparate, ideas and concepts. But it's paying attention and realizing that. So let's talk about podcasting, for example. Some of your best mentors may come from people that have never podcasted before, right? You're paying attention to the way. Do you have kids?
Not yet.
You're paying attention to the way I don't know why I asked. I'm going to roll with this example anyway. Would
Do
have
it.
been,
Yeah, that's fine.
would have been better if you did, but whatever. So you're paying attention to the way that,
Sure.
for the
I
sake of
don't
this
think so.
conversation,
We'll
you
say
do.
that way.
Yeah.
If I do, I didn't know.
You've got two kids, a boy and a girl. They're 5 and 8. But no, just paying attention to the way that, for example, a child might, pick a flower, or just crazy little things. And like, oh, interesting. I wonder what I could do with that. That's an out there example, right? But paying attention and being willing to ask, right? So if we're breaking this down into steps, I suppose step 2 would be just to ask a lot of people. Hey, would it be okay if I reached out to you once in a while and asked you a couple of questions? I mean, that's kind of my ask, and I've done it before. Sometimes people don't get back to you. Sometimes they do, right? I've had a chance to really network in a big way in the art space, largely on Instagram. And I see an artist whose work I really respect. And I'll just reach out and say, hey, your work is dope. Here's what I love about it. And that's it. And maybe they respond, maybe they don't. But that can create that has, for me, created some really cool connections, more of a peer-to-peer, type relationship. But it's just being willing to make the ask, and being okay with some people aren't necessarily going to be, willing or able to, to be, mentors. But just to really pay attention and understand that some of the best mentors you may never talk to live, right? Like, so you mentioned Tim Ferriss, right? Right. Phenomenal podcast. So one of his, books, Tribe of Mentors. I mean, that book, along with, what was the other one that was kind of a collection of his best guests? There's Tribe of Mentors and Tools of Titans. Nice.
My buddy Kyle
working.
just told me. My buddy Kyle was like, dude, you need to read this book. Yes.
Which Kyle?
Kyle Downey.
Okay.
He's from he didn't sell books.
Got it. Okay. I know a couple Kyles from the book, from the book space. So, yeah. So anyway, so just understand that, a lot of your best mentors, you may never have a chance to talk to live, and that's okay. I mean, the fact that, so this is one of my big, whatever things that I repeat myself a lot, but the fact that you or I could right now download or, buy a physical copy of a book for $17 and listen to someone's life experiences, like the everything they've learned, all of their expertise in a specific space or just their life's journey for $17. And while I'm freaking, making my art, working out, or sweeping the floors, I can absorb that and I can download that wisdom and that advice. The fact that people don't consume more podcasts, books, it really does, blow my mind.
The quote of the week last week for me was, he who can read, or they who can read that but doesn't, has no advantage over the person that cannot read.
Yes. And that was said by,
I can't remember who it was said by, but I read it. I don't remember where I read it. And I was
it's
like,
a great quote.
Is gold. It's like, if you can read, but you don't, you have no advantage of the person that can't.
Yeah. Yep. No, so I mean, it's totally, and I mean, even the fact that, like, I have a hard time sitting down and reading a physical book, right? And I always buy both because, it's a good investment to have. But I'll listen to them, first usually, and then I'll go through and highlight and mark it up and try and distill that wisdom. So anyway, sub point, right? Like, your best mentors may be ones that you never read.
I'll send you a copy of mine.
I will read it.
I'll send you a copy.
Right on.
Think about it. I'll have to order more copies, so it might be a little bit, but yes, I'll send you a copy.
Right on. I love it.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
But it's like, I don't even know, like, I don't know your experience, but I'm curious about it. Right. So the fact that, I can hear that and learn and absorb, new ideas. I mean, so anyway, just take advantage of all the wisdom and mentorship that's out there that may not be direct. Now, when we're talking about real life human beings, once you've got a mentor who's like, yeah, I'm actually willing to, to be that for you, understand that it's not, okay, I'm going to call you every day and you're going to hold me accountable and make sure I, got out of bed and brushed my, no, that's not the deal,
coach.
right?
That's a coach
for sure.
Go talk to Will Metscher about that. Which,
that's accountability for, and that's fantastic as well. But from a mentor, like, I think it's really important, once you've got somebody who's willing to engage with you at that level, is to know what you want to get out of those conversations. In other words, don't just call and say, hey, how's it going? And here's what I'm up to today. Like, great. Of course, there's a place for building a personal connection, but be clear about what it is that you want to get out of that, that mentorship and that relationship, and really consider, what you want to bring to the table when you get time with someone whose time is presumably very valuable.
Wow. This is gold stuff, my friend. Nathan, you're awesome. You are awesome.
I don't know if it's gold, but it's all I got. So
this is really great. I'm stimulated. Listen, if there's people listening to this that are bored, that's okay. Go listen to the Crime Junkie or something.
There's lots of options out there. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so many good podcasts.
That's one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite. I rarely actually like type this out, but that's one of my favorite. That's a thought that I have when someone comments something shitty on my Instagram page is like, hey, thanks for stopping by. Sounds like I'm not for you. There's millions of other options. So
you gotta love
go
the
find
haters,
some
man.
of those.
Gotta love the haters.
Yeah.
I bumped into a guy, or I don't even know if it's a guy, some person on Reddit, and they posted about this crappy, shitty experience that they had. Oh, actually, they sold a lot of books. They did okay, but then they were like shitting on Southwestern. And I was like, hey, do you want to come tell your story? We'll take all stories, good, bad, ugly, right? You want to come tell your story on our podcast? And they replied, your podcast is a circle jerk. And I was like, honestly, thanks for listening. That means you listened. But,
right.
So thanks. You didn't have to.
Right.
I didn't ask you. I didn't ask you for 2.5 hours of your time. I put it out there, and you found it. So I don't know. It's on you, I think. But there's
that actually sounds like more of a Patreon or an OnlyFans type situation if that was actually the case. But
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. No, not we should we throw our podcast on OnlyFans just to make it funny. Okay, side note, and then we can get into some Southwestern stuff. Talk to me about some of the stuff that you were struggling with when you talked about drug addiction and stuff like that, if you'd be willing to.
Of course, yeah.
Because I feel like there's a lot of power in, you just said it yourself, sharing your weaknesses and how you overcame, and you never know how that could impact someone. So I think that'd be cool to get into. Mike, is yours to share that story from whatever point you want to start and whatever point you want to finish.
Yeah, sure. And actually it kind of segues into my experience with Southwestern as well. So I mean, the short version is I've always been, this is where curiosity took me down some dangerous paths.
That's
but
where
again,
it kills the cat.
A little bit, almost killed this cat, but
he had 9 lives. So
it definitely, was something that, so I, high school did all the activities, right? Like the obvious ones, all the small school, like if you could walk in a straight line without falling over, they had a jersey for you for any sport you wanted to play, obviously. And so I played, all the, whatever, football, basketball, baseball, track. I did speech, 3-act play, choir, art club. Like if there was an activity, I was down to give it a rip and have a good time. So anyway, because my eligibility, especially for the sports that I took more seriously, was really important to me. Like I just didn't party that much. I did a little bit towards the end of my senior year. But once I got to college, that I was off to the races. I mean, the first time that I got high, I was like, oh, this is how I want to feel all the time. And I spent the next couple years actually seeing if I could do that. And where Southwestern played a role was I had more disposable cash to spend on partying, certainly than I would have otherwise, like without a doubt, Sure. And so I think that probably accelerated, my use and my experiences. But I found out pretty quickly that, my favorite drug was more. There was nothing that I tried that I didn't like. And so it accelerated real quickly from, keg parties to pills to powders to, you name it.
Whoa.
And so the short version, as I tell my story, is I went to college to, Division III small school, right? So athletically the equivalent of the 13th grade. Okay. This is not a scholarship athlete you're talking to, but I went there to play, to play defensive end. And I weighed probably, I think by the end of my freshman year, on the food plan and hitting the weights, I think I was close to 245 or 250.
Pure muscle.
And by that, not exactly. There's certainly a lot of Sundays, a part of at least 2, sometimes 3 meals a day to put on that weight. But so by the time I checked into treatment, I remember the nurse weighing me and saying 176 pounds, down from, let's just call it 250, right? So less than 2 years, later. So my addiction took me to some pretty dark places. Meth was my end of the road drug, so that's what would account for a lot of the weight loss. And so, anyway, I'm very fortunate and blessed in that because my addiction accelerated to the extent that it did so quickly. I really left myself no choice but to get sober when I was 22. So I've now been sober. I just turned 43. So I celebrated 20 years of sobriety this past April. And so thank you.
Congratulations. That is
Appreciate
amazing.
it. Yeah, and so I mean, just working the steps and being involved in recovery is a huge part of my path, and kind of how that falls in my timeline was between my third and fourth summer. I took a summer off, and then my fourth and fifth summers I was sober, and those happen to be my 10,000 unit summers. So yeah, follow-up questions if you have any, but that's my version of it today.
Yes, if you don't mind. That's okay.
Sure. Yeah, I'm an open book.
So, thank you, sir. Yeah, that's how you sell them. Open.
Fact. I got you.
That's the best way to sell them anyway. Open. Okay. First question is, was there a point where you realized, because I've never have had to struggle with addiction in my life. I mean, I think we all have in some ways. So maybe this is, yeah. But the question I'm asking is, was there ever a point as you were going down this rabbit hole where you were like, I'm definitely past the point of no return, but I don't care? Or were you completely unaware until there was like a wake up call, when you at a hospital or whatever, that you were like, because I feel like people don't realize it, and then they realize it, but they're denying it.
Yeah.
And then it's too late. Was there that moment for you?
I mean, there were a couple of moments like that, for sure. I think that, once, I mean, by definition, once addiction is the name of the game that you're playing, the choice to stop is no longer on the table.
Okay.
And so that's kind of where, like, I mean, I remember vividly a conversation I had with my mom and dad at Perkins family restaurant.
Perkins, baby.
Let's
go.
Single-handedly
Better than IHOP.
Single-handedly keeping the oversized American flag industry in business.
That's right.
But I remember,
if you know what Perkins is, that's a great joke. Oh man.
So I'm sitting across from my mom and dad, and I'm strung out. I hadn't slept for, I don't know, probably 3-4 days. And I was trying to convince them that I needed more money for rent. And I remember trying to make a sale to my parents that I was okay and that I was happy. And that's part of, like, the addicted mind is professional at rationalizing. We're professional rationalizers. We're experts at finding ways to keep ourselves, high, basically. And so, was there a moment? There were a couple moments, for sure, when I was like, "Oh, I've fallen off the edge." I mean, I ended up having to go through treatment twice. The first time was psychedelics were kind of my jam. Like, once I found LSD, that was, let's go. That was my favorite. So the first time I was in treatment was a result of being on what ended up being a 7+ day trip. So I'll tell a quick drug story, I suppose, since you said nothing's off the table. But
Sure,
we were doing some liquid acid. If you've ever done that, it comes out of a dropper, like a Visine bottle, basically, right? So I was squeezing what I thought was going to be a dose or two in my mouth, and the cap came off, and everything in the bottle came in my mouth. And I looked at my friend, who was named Acid Joe, and I said, what should I do? And he said, "Go for it, man." And so I did. So I swallowed it, and that set me off. And so fast forward, 5 or 6 days in, and I hadn't slept. I still was out of my mind, and I was, I remember vividly. I was sitting on a big pile of dirty laundry in a hallway, and this was like an old, like, picture the kind of place that you'd stay as a whatever, college lodging, but the wall was moving without my permission, and I was had slept. I got scared. I was like, oh, what if I'm like this forever? So that's when I called my parents and said, hey, here's what's going on. And they came and picked me up and got me into treatment the first time. So that was probably the first wake up call. Not shockingly, not the last. I convinced myself after being sober for a period of time that I could probably handle it again, things just got a little out of control. So after relapsing and going down an even darker path, that's when I went through treatment a second time and finally got sober. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I guess it was more something along the lines of, I think you nailed it. Because it's curious when you mentioned addiction by definition is when stopping is no longer on the table. But I guess, what do you recall the last time where stopping was on the table and then it was like you just didn't make that choice and then it no longer became?
I don't.
Or did you lose that? You lost it.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
mean,
the scary part,
typically,
right?
most stories like that follow a path of things sort of sliding off, and you don't realize you're deep into the quicksand until it's too late. In most cases,
Right.
yeah.
So for someone who might be listening to this, who might be like, "Oh, I can stop," and you can, probably you should take that option before it's no longer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still active in the 12 steps of recovery, and I have a sponsor. I work with sponsors. I go to meetings. And so one of the things that is said to somebody who believes that they can still stop is to go ahead and try some controlled using or drinking, whatever it might be, and try and prove that is the case. And
Right.
you might find that you can, and if you can, then that might be a smart idea. You may find that you can't, and if that's the case, then it may make sense to consider getting on a path to recovery.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, okay, here's the thought. I don't know where I might have been on Rogan that I heard this, or some other podcast that I was listening to, and they were talking about how studies, like psychological studies, are talking about how addiction is actually a symptom of something else instead of an actual so for example, like there's people who do acid in a healthy way, like the
Oh yeah.
people who go and they do Jesus, who go find Jesus and stuff, or like there's people who um like drink, and they can drink a lot, but it's never an addiction because it can, right? But then what happens is something else happens, they get divorced, some shit happens, real traumatic stuff happens, and since they're used to doing this, then it becomes a crutch, and then that the addiction is actually part of it's just another symptom in a much bigger problem that they're not dealing with. What are your thoughts on that, given that you've like experienced addiction and overcome it? Like, do you think that's valid, or do you think it's like, no, there's no way, it's actually the problem is the drug or whatever? I mean, I guess meth is meth, right? So like,
yeah,
that's a problem.
Not a lot of social meth users. That's kind of an end of the road type situation.
Yeah, that's like,
I mean,
that's the last branch of the tree of dying.
it's
right?
pretty
Like,
close. Yeah, that and a couple of other ugly other ones. But I'm always very careful to, when I talk about this publicly, which I'm certainly comfortable doing, but to make it very clear that I'm nothing resembling, an expert on the subject of addiction, apart from my personal experience, my N equals 1 sample size, you know what I mean? So, so I mean, as far as, I think I'm just going to respond in the way that something that you made me think of with your question, which is, I think that, we are a perpetually distracted population. And I think that's never been more true than it is right now. And so there's always something that will give us a feeling that is outside of ourselves. Could be anything, right? Could be the phone, social media, could be food, could be gambling, could be sex, could be television. It doesn't need to be something that's inherently, bad or damaging. But it's escapism in innumerable forms. And so I think that one of my hopes, for my children, for example, is that they will develop a practice around being aware of their own experience and being able to self-censor and acknowledge when something is no longer serving them or doing what it's supposed to do. And the devil's in the details, right? The dose matters. Like, I'm a I think that there's tremendous benefits of psychedelics and different different drugs when used appropriately that can be transformational, right? So I don't think that demonizing anything, if you want, let's talk about gambling. If you like going and playing a few hands of blackjack when you're in Vegas, rock and roll, right? But it's how much does it prevent you from being the person that God intended you to be, or whatever your belief system might be. That to me is ultimately the question that I ask people when I have these types of conversations. I was talking to a dear friend of mine recently, and he approached me and said, "Hey, here's what's going on with my drinking. I'm not sure." And I have these conversations a lot, because people know that I've been sober for quite some time. And I just don't know. I'm just not. And I said, "Listen, it's up to you to decide, when enough's enough, or if alcohol in this case still has a place in your life." But the clarifying question that I would encourage you to ask yourself is this getting you closer to the person that you feel you were meant to be, or is it holding you back? That to me is a critical question, not just for using or for addiction type behavior, but really for anything. I have removed intentionally a number of things from my life at different times that just no longer serve the person that I believed I was meant to be. I've told this story a lot, but I don't do things part way. Maybe you've recognized that or picked up on that at this point in our conversation. So moderation is not a strength of mine. And so, there's a point, it's just a silly example, but it's the one that comes to mind right now, where I realized that fantasy football was no longer consistent with the type of father and husband that I wanted to be, because I was sitting on the couch watching a meaningless game between the Browns and the Bengals, on a with whatever laptop, iPad, phone, you know what I mean? And so I just identified like this is no longer consistent with the person that I aspire to be, the kind of whatever present husband and father that I want to be on a Sunday afternoon. And so I just cut that out. Right? Nothing inherently bad about fantasy football. Like if that's a thing that works for you, rock and roll. But it's just being, I think, having a level of awareness to identify when something is no longer consistent with the person that you believe you're meant to be.
Beautiful. This is great, man. Thank you for sharing all this stuff. This is really, really, really good stuff. I guess last question on this topic is, when you think of your kids and them navigating in a world where it just seems to be like drugs are becoming more, I don't know, like accessible. I come from Colombia, right? So, drug dealing and stuff I guess, has always been something I've known about in the world. But like,
Sure.
as your kids get older, how do you help them navigate this, like going to college and that kind of stuff? Like, that seems like you would have a very unique perspective, and so I would be curious to see, like, in your mind, like, here's how I'd approach them about this.
Yeah, I think for me, it was definitely a decision that I had to make. With my wife. My daughters, I should say, are now 14 and 16. So they just yesterday started 8th and 11th grade respectively. So they're certainly of an age where having those conversations is absolutely, relevant. And I'm just open about it. I'm very, they know why I go to my meetings. They know, why it's a big deal when, every year when, April 16th comes around and say, hey, I'm grateful for another year of sobriety. And so, so those conversations are important. I think that, ultimately, I think one of the biggest goals as a father is to help set my children on a path where they can identify who they want to be and who they truly are, and make sure that the choices they make are in alignment with, who God created them to be and the path that they want to be on. And so as a North Star, as a governing principle of, is this consistent with the person that I aspire to be? Am I making the most of the gifts that I've been given? That is, again, if I'm doing it right, hopefully something that my wife and I are having consistent conversations, either directly or indirectly, around situational things that come up, with our girls.
Oh man, that's beautiful. I was just having this thought I was in the shower and I was having like, I don't have kids, but I got married
No, you
last
do. We
February.
we covered this. You got a
Oh,
five
that's
and an
right. My
8-year-old.
right. Excuse me.
Yeah, try
My
and keep
5
up.
and 8-year-old. I forgot about him. I sorry, children. I have 2 daughters. We'll just say they're 5 and 8. But my thoughts, because my wife and I have talked a lot about this, where it's like, hey, how we, especially living in Portland, where um, Portland's pretty progressive. So if things are trending here, they're not going to trend in Nebraska for another like year and a half.
Right.
But like,
Have you had Brian
thing,
Wilson on, by the way?
not yet. He is on my list.
Certainly, someone has mentioned Brian to you.
Oh, for sure. I
Yeah.
hang out with Brian. I just texted him last week because we're gonna go watch the Husker game. I mean, he came to our reception for my wedding and stuff. Yeah, he's.
Okay.
At first, I asked him and he said no. And he said no, and then finally he was like, "Okay, I'll come on at some point." I'm like, "Thank God."
Well, you talk
Brian's
about
a
moving from
stud.
Nebraska to Portland, like
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
yeah,
that's him. Yeah, what a good guy.
the
But
best.
yeah, no, on that note, it's like we're, right now the world's changing with like the LGBTQ community and the drug community and like all those different things where it's like, hey, this is not what we were exposed to as kids. Like I have a whole different, like my background is my family moved here because we were gonna get murdered. So if we had to do that, I got
Right.
which
Yep.
shit, we might have to given whatever. The point is, um, the point is like that this conversation comes up is like, how do we help our kids navigate this world that we're freaking moving towards? And I feel like every generation has always had that same issue. It's never been not that way. And so like the thought I have, and this could be completely wrong, but I'm like, I think like in the world of things, what never changes is like what's always consistent is how you treat yourself and how you treat other people, how you choose to look at the problems in your life and how you choose to look at the blessings in them. And if we can teach them to discern all like within those 4 or 5 things well, then if something happens that we won't even like our parents didn't have to deal with, and they won't have to deal with, like it's just unique to this particular place and time in history, then following those 4 things or 5, 6 things, whatever, however many they end up being, like it'll be okay. Like teaching them to make the choice of, hey, how are you treating yourself, how are you treating other people, right? And if you teach them to love yourself, love other people, respect yourself, respect other people, in whatever shape or form that looks in that particular situation, because you can't coach for every situation. Kind of like when you're selling books, right? You can't, and this is good, maybe segue to Southwestern. When you became a manager and you try to like, I took my brother and I'm like, hey, I mean, how the hell am I going to teach him if a gun gets pulled to his face? Because maybe it won't. But then, of course, something is going to happen to him this summer that I didn't even have to deal with. But what I can do is teach him, all right, 3 positives when something happens to you, right? Self talk, right? The things that like would probably be the formula to solve any problem, instead of trying to prepare them for everything that I can think of that probably won't even happen. I don't know if that makes sense, but what you said made me think of that, where you're like, hey, teaching my kids,
Hmm.
here's who they are, here's who they want to be, and whatever situation you find yourself in, ask yourself those questions, and hopefully we did a good job of teaching you about yourself enough to make the right choice. So
Yep.
brilliantly done, sir. Well, it's your kids are going to do great. Kids are good. I'm excited
Well,
for them.
let's hope so. I mean, the report card doesn't really come out until they're in their, I don't know, mid-30s probably. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
but hey, they'll take over the world just like the rest of us. Starts in here though. All right, man. Well, shoot, this is great. Do you want to jump into some Southwestern stuff?
Sure. Yeah, let's talk
Is that
about it.
cool?
Yeah,
Thanks for your time a lot.
my pleasure.
As we jump into this, big shout out from our friend Greta Huerta, who is one of the loveliest persons you'll ever meet. That girl got you. She dropped some wisdom from Cardinal Senior Benefits. She joined Cardinal Senior Benefits, started making a ton of money, and the suggestion that she gave us was about saving and investing. So biggest thing I can say to you guys, and she mentioned to us, is emergency funds and making sure that you guys are saving up 3 to 6 months of income for any sort of emergency that was her gift to you. And then if you guys are looking into real estate, here's some advice from Pat Roach. We asked him, hey, what makes someone successful in real estate? He goes, well, that can mean a few things. Someone can build a successful brokerage or just be a standout agent. But the keys either way are building out your network and making sure that that is important to you, to just network really, really well. And then on the other side is the most important thing for your client is that you are a professional. So are you operating with integrity, reliability? Do you know a lot about, are you a student of the game essentially? Do you know about the property values? Do you know about the neighborhoods that you're looking into? All of that kind of stuff. is important. So professionalism on the outside and networking on the inside. If you guys want to learn more about how to work with Pat Roach in Southwestern Real Estate, reach out to us. We've had plenty of episodes with their guests. If you guys want to with their agents, if you guys want to hear more about their experience and be like, hey, maybe this is good for me, let us know and we'll put you in touch with Pat. Could be for you, might not be. Who knows? Who's to say? But all right, my friend, here we go. So we are here just ready to jump into some Southwestern stories and some Southwestern experiences. But I always like to start at the beginning because that makes sense. So let's roll the clocks back. You're sitting in Concordia College, or are you already in Minnesota at this point? I don't know. But where and how did you get told about this whole crazy
Yeah. So I was a freshman, and I was sitting in my dorm room, and I was most certainly high, and I was, I think, probably indulging in one of my favorite stoner treats of cheddar Pringles and chicken ramen. Pretty choice. Yeah.
It's just missing some sriracha.
That's right. So
that's pretty solid.
So the phone rings, and on the other end is Tony Ripley.
The velvety voice.
That's right. He led with, "You've been recommended as a candidate," right? We all know the script.
Of course.
For an internship. And having the ego that I have and certainly had at that time, I said, well, of course I have. That makes sense. Obviously, I've been recommended. It's not a matter of if someone recommended me. It's only a matter of who could have possibly done it. Could be anybody.
Of course they did. Inserts Pringle in mouth.
Totally. And so thankfully, I said, yeah, sure. Sounds good. And was had the presence of mind in my state at the time to jot down, whichever room it was going to be in, and went to the group interview the following day. Now, Mike Lippert, have you had Mike on before?
No, man. This is good.
Yeah. So Mike Lippert was helping out. He and Tony, I think they started at the exact same time, but he was conducting the group interview on that particular day. And came back. They offered me a spot, and I said, "Sounds good." So I've always been a yes first kind of person, and that was a good example of that. And so that began, of course, a series of conversations. I mean, one of the things that was, certainly Tony's exceptional strength as a leader was his ability to connect and build relationships with people. And he started from the word go. We met every single week leading up to the summer, and then I was off to Grand Rapids, Michigan for my first summer.
Bro, that's so funny. Now I this is becoming a custom, and I don't necessarily mean for it to, because I like the fluidness of these episodes, but I always like to ask, first sales school, the first experience of like just that thing in your, like this enormous energy in your face. What do you recall of this, and how it like shaped you? Because I feel like that's like the first taste of the faucet, that turns into a fire hydrant.
I'm trying to, it's funny. Well, for some reason, what jumps to mind is staying at the meeting after, your little org, breakdown at the end of the day, and everyone cramming into a room, sitting on the floor or whatever of the La Quinta or whatever it was at the time, right?
It still is.
Yeah. So, and just being like, what are we, what am I doing? I mean, similar probably to, most people's like, what the hell have I gotten myself into? I remember having a conversation with someone who has become a dear, lifelong friend of mine, Rich Strobel, who was also on Tony's first team. And I remember sitting out underneath, the little car park by the main entrance, the little bench there,
we've all cried there.
for sure. How many tears has the wood on that bench absorbed? One
or
can
made
only
out
guess.
With someone. Like a checkout or something.
So Rich and I were just talking, but so we, and I remember saying like, all right, man, hey, so the talk was probably some version of like, whatever, don't quit, right? And so I remember, making that, bro pact at the time, pinky swear, like we're going to finish out this first summer. So, anyway, that's the first thing that comes to mind with the sales school experience, in addition to, taking a lot of pride in being able to sprint up the hill, book bag in hand, and pass a few people along the way. But yeah, good for you.
That's pretty solid. I know some people don't know, like the newer book kids don't have that experience. I don't know if they, because I think, honestly, because I don't think sales school is big enough to fill out the War Memorial anymore. And I might be eating my words here. So if you have had that experience, sorry. But there's been people on the show or even outside of that I've had conversations with when they're like, what do they mean when they mean running up the hill? I'm like, oh, you didn't have that experience?
Right.
So maybe they were just at a smaller sales school that didn't require them to go out. They just stayed at the company. But I know what you mean. That hill, it gets steeper every time. I feel like
it's no joke.
You're like, this is garbage. That's crazy. I always recall a couple of things. I recall the very first vivid memory. I mean, I remember getting in, checking in, right? The very first thing I remember going, holy shit, was when Dan Moore came out and started doing his bit about Mr. M. And you're like, I just remember thinking, like, I want to be a speaker like that someday. Like his ability to publicly speak to people, like it's like world class. And I just remember that. And then I remember more Utley, like the video they would show.
Oh yeah.
Jeez, this is crazy. This guy's, with all this manure, there's got to be a pony somewhere. Like just this crazy tenor, whatever the heck, baritone voice he had. Brilliant. So you went out to Grand Rapids that first summer. Do you remember? I've also got into the habit of asking this, but I love this. Do you remember your first store, and do you remember your first customer? I feel like we never forget these. Or
I remember my first street. I think I could probably, if I had to drive there right now, I could. But I vividly remember my first street. I remember, an experience that probably anyone that sold books has had, which is, knocking on the same door twice, in the same day. I did that. My first street, let's just, for the sake of the story, let's just say it was my first day. It was certainly my first week, but that feeling of being like, I've been here today, haven't I? Right.
You stop mid approach and you're like,
totally. Yeah. Still not interested. Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure I didn't catch you on a bad day, this morning. But yeah, no, I do. I remember the first time, and back to that sort of whole belief barrier thing. I remember that first sale of, filling out the order pad for you kids out there, right? Used to have to physically, write down the orders. And being like, is this happening? Is somebody actually, is this working? Because of course, you follow somebody, and I think, I can't recall who I followed, but I don't remember seeing many, if any, books sold on my follow day. And so the belief barrier was still certainly there of like, do people actually like buy this shit? And does this actually work? And so, I remember vividly that feeling of walking out, check in hand, being like, holy cow, this is real, and I was a walker who became a biker, and then ultimately my parents were kind enough to help me out with the vehicle at some point midsummer. So I had hit for the cycle, had the trifecta of experiences that first summer. Yeah.
Walking on a rainy day I never walked, but walking on a rainy day has got to be a brutal experience.
Yeah. I mean, you literally feel like the world's just pissing on you, and you're like, what am I, you feel like a pariah, trying to walk into somebody's house like a wet dog, like, hey, can I come in and maybe just get some shelter or, sell you something, it's pretty funny. I mean, I will say this, Grand Rapids was, you couldn't have picked a better territory for a 3/4 Dutch kid who grew up in the Christian Reformed Church like I did. Like Grand Rapids, Michigan, like you couldn't, like all the names I could pronounce. Like, yeah, sure, yeah. Are you a van or are you a D? Yeah, I mean that's the. So for anybody who understands Dutch community or Michigan, will be able to relate to that. But so no, I mean it was a great fit for me in terms of my whatever cultural background, for sure. Yeah.
I love the joke about the van or the D. People who understand Dutch culture or watch soccer and know the Dutch players,
right?
They're all like Van Bronckhorst, Van Dijk, or
that's right.
De Jong.
Yep.
Like, Yeah, they're all D or B.
That's right. Yep.
I get it.
My
So
people tend to
funny.
excel in, speed skating in the Winter Olympics. Is traditionally a Dutch dominated sport. There's a couple
That's
of
right.
others,
And
but yeah.
Formula One. And big
Yeah.
Max Verstappen is, well, technically he was born in Belgium, but he's very much popularly Dutch. And he
Man,
is
so it's
crushing
so
it.
funny. I've been binging on a race to, what is it called? A race to
Drive
whatever
to
I'm on.
Survive.
Drive to Survive. There it is. Thank you.
Oh yeah. Welcome to the sport, bro.
I'm on like season 3. It's such a well done documentary. It's just
Amazing.
It's just fantastic. Yeah.
I will tell you, and this is not a spoiler. When you get to season 4, like watch it just so you can see what happens. But if you really want a taste of what happens in that season, go watch like a YouTube made like break. It was terrible. Season 4 was bad. As a fan of the story, it was bad.
Interesting.
Because
Yeah.
nobody's gonna care about this, but long story short, what happened in naturally occurring events throughout the season, both between like the top drivers and like even the midfield drivers, like I don't think Hollywood could have done a better script for the whole thing. Like legit,
Right.
it was like, I mean, there's no way people who were in the sports community in general didn't hear about this on ESPN or something, because it was so historic that like ESPN was reporting on it on like regular, like on Sports Center, and people were like, I remember people texting me like, oh, I just saw about Formula One, it's kind of crazy, right? I'm like, dude, you have no idea, it's been bananas the whole season. So I don't know that they were able to do it justice. So I would say definitely find a different way of like some really well made fan video of YouTube. They probably did a good job to explain what happened that season.
I'm in that gap where I've started to watch a couple of races to like, I'm not following it, but like under that, I could probably name the top 3, whatever, when they resume. Is it coming up? This doesn't matter. Anyway. But so I'm kind of in that gap where I'm kind of aware of what's going on in real time, but I'm also like still in 2020. Okay.
Yeah. I get you. I know where you're at. This season's not been as good. We're getting on a tangent here, but anyway, long story short, I'll get you. It's my favorite sport, bro. I watched this since I was like,
oh wow,
7.
okay,
like,
yeah,
I'm a fan,
nice,
I'm a fan.
Yep,
I'm an F1 fan. One of my favorite podcasts is WTF1. There's a podcast called WTF1.
I don't know, but that's a great name. I'm already in on the name.
Yeah, it's a great name. Yeah, I want to start a second podcast about Formula One called Slipstream. I feel like that'd be good. Working on it, but anyway, okay, back to your first summer. So you're in Grand Rapids. How did you do? How was it? Like, was it, I don't care about units per se, but like, how did you, I mean, if you want to share, but like, was it like a terrible summer? You're like, I don't know, I'm going to come back, and someone convinced you? Or were you like, this is an amazing summer experience, I got to do this for my life, I'm going to get a tattoo of Dan Moore or something like that? Well, what were you in?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm willing to share my experience with addiction and losing family members, but I'm not going to tell you how many units I sold my first summer. That is actually where I draw the. No, I'm kidding. Of course,
we've gone too far.
How dare you? Yeah, so I sold 3,500, something like that, units my first summer. So I think I was top 20 or something like that.
That's a great first summer
for first year. Yeah. So I, made the trip and all that, and I think that I believe my check was something like $17,000 or something like that after my first summer. So yeah, I mean, I walked out of there being like, yeah, this is I'm gonna keep doing this, and of course you get back into the school year flow and you have that pit in your stomach, as spring approaches and you start to have the get backs and all that. But yeah, there really wasn't a question for me as to whether or not I was going to return. And I will say too that I think what one of the greatest gifts that my experience with Southwestern gave me was a realization that my value to the marketplace was going to come from, or could come from, sales, business, the entrepreneurial path, as opposed to a pure product of the degree that I might get, that I didn't end up getting.
100%. I understand that, but
and that's a tremendous gift. I mean, I think that's something that
that's wise to learn early on too.
Oh yeah,
it's a really good time to learn that.
And just a comfort level of being willing to bet on yourself and acknowledge that when I'm willing to say, hey, I don't know how this is going to go, but I'm going to put my all into it and bet on me. Which, oh, by the way, great time to do that at whatever 19 years old. To kind of have that mindset engraved. But those lessons that I learned those summers certainly contributed to me being willing to take the leap that I did, with whatever, making a pretty dramatic switch from, business to artist. Right. So, yeah.
Fantastic. So then, as your career progressed, and what were some of the lessons as you because you went from like 3,500 units and then you jumped to 10,000, and of course you had your bout there with addiction, and so how did you navigate through that, and then what do you attribute to the rise of like just that that ascension to like, was it just getting clean, or were there other things that you figured out along the way that you're like, all right, this is who I can be?
I didn't. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what the progression was exactly. I think it was like 3,500, and then I don't know, 5 or 6, and then like a 7,500, and then the last two were just
Oh,
over 10, something like
so it's
that.
pretty
Yeah.
natural, pretty
Yeah.
solid, healthy growth.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, because
Yeah.
some people don't do that. Some people go like 35, 35, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5, 12, and they just
And then
jump and
pop.
figure something
Yeah.
out. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think that's just the way it worked out, I suppose. But I always had the mindset of like, um, there's no reason not to improve. There's no reason not to grow, summer over summer. And I think the only summer where that was really in question was my third summer. I feel like I really like those last few weeks were critical, and being able to, exceed my previous. I didn't use during the summer, so this was kind of like while I was still
I was
using and
gonna.
partying, but before I got before it got really bad. That's kind of that 2-year gap where it got really bad, got sober, and then came back for my fourth and fifth summer. So, but I will say my third summer for sure, it was tough those first few weeks of going from using regularly to nothing at all was quite something for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
was it 'cause at that point were you using? Because you said you kind of did a variety of things. Was it? How were you able to do so? Because I mean, was it just weed that you were doing at that point, or were you already into like some of the hard
No, I was into
heavy?
powders and pills by that point, but it wasn't like a daily, thing necessarily, at least not yet. It was more of a, I don't know, 2, 3, sometimes 4 or 5 day a week thing. But I would say that I was not yet physically addicted to the point where I would have had, withdrawals, when I quit cold turkey. But that definitely made sales school that third summer pretty
Yeah,
pretty rough, because I was
sure,
yeah, accustomed to having that be a part of almost every day for sure.
sure. Damn, man, that's crazy. So then, so the 99, 2000, 2001, and then so you take O2 and you took O2 off.
Yeah, just one summer. I mean, it ended up being whatever that is, almost 2 years. But yeah, just one summer that I missed would have been the summer of '02. Yeah, and then I did
Yeah,
'03 and '04, and then that was my
yeah.
'04 was my last. Yep.
Oh one, oh one is probably that third time is probably when you met Brian Wilson, because that's when he like hit 16,000 units and just crushed. Like UNL was crushing.
Yeah.
Yvette, Nick Henderson, like all these guys were
Yep.
just cranking. Um, Question for you: was it scary? Because, and maybe gets into some stuff about Southwestern that might be interesting to talk about, but sometimes the culture in Southwestern is not healthy for a person who's struggling with sobriety or like
Hmm.
trying to achieve sobriety. Does that make sense? Like Sizzler trips, you got your
Oh, sure.
heavy
Yeah.
drinking, right? You got some get backs and meetings throughout the year. There's some substances that are used, right?
I've heard stories. Yeah.
I've heard stories. Yeah, I should.
We
I've
had
heard
one of our
stories.
trips was on the the cruise. It was a Carnival cruise ship. I'll never forget this. We got on the ship, and they all have their names. This cruise ship on in the Carnival line was called Ecstasy, and it
Of
was a
course.
very appropriately named trip. And I don't want to. I shouldn't even say this, but yeah, I definitely spent a lot of time hanging out with the Eagle
Crowd.
Blitz kids.
Yeah, you know what? Listen, I'm sorry. We all
Those
you know
Eagle Blitzers, they didn't fuck around, man. Like they were
they party
happy to
hard.
throw.
And
Absolutely.
look, and listen, and this is important because we're getting bigger as a show, and I don't want to seem like we are so big, but I just want to say it's not everybody that was an Eagle Blitz. I understand. We're not trying to say no,
Of
but
course.
also as a group, we know that some crowds partied. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
And for those people, we just refer to them as morts. So
As
sometimes
what?
we party at Mort. Like Mort would show up with his substances, and Mort would do this. So
Oh,
if there's
interesting. I've
people
never
that
heard that.
yeah, if you have like people who we started this recently, where it's like you don't want to say who it is, so you just go, let's just call my friend Mort.
Got
Mort
it.
thought it was a
Got
good
it.
idea to get in the front seat of the taxi or
Makes
whatever.
sense.
And you're like,
Makes sense.
yeah. So we don't they who must not be named or who should not be named,
Understood.
but anyway, so on that note, so like there was definitely people who were partaking in all sorts of allegedly partaking in some of these substances in some different events where it was maybe normal for a college age group of people to do so. So when you come back after your sobriety and you start that day, year one, probably when it's the toughest. Well, I don't know. I don't want to assume, but like year one when it's just so fresh. Was that scary for you? Did you find some like how did that? What did that do to your like determination, or like how did you deal with that?
Rephrase your question for me.
Oh yeah, no, I was just talking about. So when you come back to summer number 4, you just
Yeah.
got done.
Okay.
You
Yep.
start getting clean, and
Yeah.
then you go back into. I'm not saying everybody in Southwestern is doing this, but if you want
Got
to
it.
find this within a group of college kids,
I got you. Yeah.
you will find it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
did you?
So I mean, at that point, like the reason from a timing standpoint, I could have probably gone back and not skipped a summer. So I got sober in April. So I got out of treatment, whatever, mid-May, I suppose it would have been. And like there was still time for me to, sneak in and try to go and sell that summer. But I can't remember how that decision was made or if it was even something that I really thought about too hard. But looking back, I'm certainly thankful that I decided to go and, work construction and just like have a consistent schedule where I was around my support system, where I was going to my, my meetings consistently and talking to my sponsor and just doing the things that somebody, especially early in recovery, needs to do, to progress and establish a foundation, of recovery to stay that way. So by the time that the following summer, rolled around, I was on much firmer footing, to put it that way. Right. I was, I felt ready to do that. And so I still kept going to meetings during the summer, especially on the weekends, talking to my sponsor, just doing the things that somebody in recovery, needs to do. And so once I changed my identity around, going from somebody who uses to, somebody who no longer uses, because I was, working a proper program, staying sober on the scissors and those types of things wasn't a huge, challenge for me.
That's sweet. I'm glad, man. That's happy. I can see where that would be scary, but I'm glad that was never really the tough thing. Wow. So why did you? And again, we can get into Southwestern specific favorite stories if you want to before we go into ponytails. There's like some funny stories that aren't ponytail stories, but like we can get into those here in a sec. But why did you decide to leave? How did you know it was time?
Yeah. So
you back to back 10,000 unit summers. You're like,
yep.
I should do it again, right?
I went into what was my last summer with the mindset that was going to be my last summer, and I was comfortable telling Tim Ritzer that who's not an easy individual to say no to.
We're waiting to have him on the show. He will be at some point.
He ought to be. I mean, I don't know of anybody who has had more success on the back of just being like a really cool person that people want to be around than Ritz. But and we're still in touch today,
maybe
which is pretty cool. But
him and Ron Alford.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't know Ron as well, but was certainly from that same era for sure.
They're 100%. Cut from the same cloth, man.
That's right.
Something about them. They're like, oh, we're gonna run 50 million miles. Yeah, like those are the 2%ers we were talking about. It's like, oh,
that's right.
Just are good at everything. I hate you.
Yeah.
Teach me.
Yeah. So I went into that last summer with that mindset of that it was gonna be my last. I was my now wife. She sold for one summer. And I always make the joke that it was
girl.
She is, yeah. And so I always make the joke that she only needed one summer to have a money summer because she met me.
You're her ponytail.
That's right. Apparently, she may or may not agree with that. But So anyway, so we were getting real serious, and it was just, I was just ready, to be done and to kind of move on. So it wasn't a hard decision.
Fair enough. Yeah, some people have a hard time leaving, which is okay, but it's just like, ooh, dang.
Yeah, I mean, I should say too, like, I mean, this isn't a regret that I have necessarily around my Southwestern experience, but I would say something that is relevant, I suppose, for this podcast would be that I pretty much just sold, like once I got in that mindset of like, I want to be a top producer, and I was never like a top, whatever, 3 or 5 type person, but once I got that mindset of like, I'm a top producer, whatever, I found, and this is just a maturity thing, looking back, but I found, people on my team to be distractions. And I felt like I could, frankly, just make more money by focusing on myself and selling a whole bunch of books. So I think my biggest team might've been, I think I took out maybe 6 or 7 people, 1 year or something like that. But I guess the point is, it was, I think, easier to walk away without having an organization, that I would have been, passing on or walking away from. So that certainly made it easier to move on.
Yeah, that's true. Because sometimes you're like, man, I'm making like a guaranteed, 50, 80,000 just by continuing to keep bringing these people on top of what I can make. So it's like harder
Right.
to say no to that versus like, I can do this. And because here's the deal, it's true. Like you go and like, especially if you go into insurance after that, like you make a ton more money with the same amount of effort, or not even like half the amount of effort in a different industry. So it's a good choice to have made. Good stuff,
It
man.
worked out. Yeah, I mean, it was a natural progression from the book business into the insurance business, which is of course a transition that a lot of people have made over the years.
Yeah.
But coming back to Brian, in fact, he was when Peter Foray came down to have breakfast with me. My last summer was in. How do I not know this? Was that my last summer or my second to last summer? Maybe it was my second to last. Anyway, it was in Columbia, South Carolina, at the Lizard's Thicket. I don't know if that chain's still around, but anyway, that was our breakfast spot that summer. And Peter Foray came down and had breakfast and started the conversation around, what a career path with Family Heritage and at the time Legacy Financial Services would have been like. It just made sense, But anyway, so Brian was Peter's star like names list of somebody who was kicking ass in that space, and I knew Brian well enough to call him up and say, "Hey, is this legit?" And so Brian was instrumental in helping me have the confidence to move into that space, and also was my field trainer, as a matter of fact. So when Travis Wilson and myself started in Minnesota here with Family Heritage, we were the only 2 people in Minnesota, and so we were kind of training each other. But Brian Wilson came up and gave me some field training as well.
He's a beast. That's awesome, man. Well,
yeah.
We can get into some fun stories as we go through I have like a couple of like blitz questions for you, and then whatever stories pop up from that
Sure.
you can think of. And if nothing comes up, that's fine. And then we'll go into ponytails.
Okay. Now, just so I'm clear, what is the difference between a story and a ponytail?
So favorite stories could be like, oh, this happened, it was funny, but like a quick short story, or like, oh, this is a good story, it was good. But the ponytail is like your I can't believe this is happening, or this isn't happening story.
Got it.
Like,
okay. All right.
Right. So to give you an idea, so Lee McCroskey had a bunch of stories of like he remembered he had his dirt pile story, but he told us the pole story, which if you haven't heard, is when he shit his pants in the middle of the
Who are we talking about? Who did?
Lee McCroskey.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sure.
Brandon Q told us about Brandon Q went on this like 30-minute story about how he got arrested and then still hit Sizzler, and it was like really like a triumphant win. That could be a thing. Like some people told us about when they met their spouse. That was a big ponytail. So the ponytails are like the top shelf stories. You're like, oh, open in case.
Are there any stories around almost getting arrested on Sizzler? Is that a?
Yeah, we've had those, but some of them, yeah. And then other like regular funny stories is like, oh, one time I had this dad and I arm wrestled him and then he bought. Like it's not as like a giant story, but if it could be like, oh, this reminds me, this is funny, that happened to me my second summer or whatever, or I had a whatever. But they usually come from blitz questions. So I'll ask you some like general questions about your experience, and then you tell me, if anything pops up. For example, I always ask this question: number 1, favorite place to have sold, favorite territory out of your 5 summers?
I mean, I sold in Michigan for 3 summers. 3 of my 5 were in Michigan. So I love Michigan. Yeah.
Michigan's good. Okay.
If today I had to go write 10,000 units, I would choose to go to Southern Michigan.
That's the place, huh?
Assuming that
That's right.
that did not, in this case, involve me, leaving my family for 3 months. But yeah.
Fair enough. Between big brick country and or like tight suburb neighborhoods, what was your like ideal territory?
It's funny. So I never got over the idea of people seeing me knock on other doors, not their own door, right? But the idea of like, I'm at this door and the houses
Yes.
around are seeing me and they're like, oh, here comes this asshole.
Yeah, the
So
neighbor like that's mowing and just eyeing you. You're like,
totally. For me, it was
yeah,
way more about like, do I have cover? Do I have tree cover? So I loved
absolutely.
working more big, small brick. I didn't really care that much, but I loved having tree cover where I felt like I could get in and get out without being seen. So what I hated the most, again, small houses, big houses, what I hated the most was a brand new, neighborhood where there was no trees and literally you were, now I'm visualizing some of them, you know what I mean? And like I was convinced that like everybody of the 17 houses that I could see in that direction were looking at me and picturing them like, because that does happen once in a while, right? Like, hey, heads up, someone's coming.
Oh.
So for me, it wasn't a matter of the size of the brick. I sold plenty in both, but I just liked having, more mature trees and something to help me with that fear that I really never got over of someone's watching me knock on this door.
Yeah, it's real. And now see this you kind of aged yourself a little bit because you sold in 04. You didn't get to experience moms on Facebook groups of like neighborhood
Not really.
groups.
Not really.
Oh
No.
my God. They don't call each other. They
Right.
just would post on the Hamilton community Facebook HOA group.
Yeah.
There's some kid from Nebraska. You'd show up and it's fucking over.
Right.
You'd be like, hey, have you like the second approach? Have you not heard about me? No, we've heard about you.
Right.
We're not interested. People are talking smack about you.
Yep.
Like, your breath stinks and you're too short and you walk funny. Like,
Right.
just ripping you apart personally. Like,
Yep.
okay, I'll go to the next house. It's gonna be a great day. So yeah, I
Totally.
understand. So, but when so country was better for that too, because when the houses were like super spread out, you're like, sweet, nobody knows I'm knocking here, and then you go to the next house. I always
That's
like
right.
country.
Yep.
Or tree cover. Massachusetts was that way too, where like they're next to each other, the houses, but there's tree cover.
Yeah.
I feel you. Hell yeah. Favorite advanced sales tape?
Probably the is it Bill Zizzy and Dave Rosen?
Yes.
That 1-2 punch was just like, I mean, once you get guy just hydro seeded his lawn, I was like, man, Salvador Dali been up in here? Like just those like what? That's so incredible. But in fact, to bring things full circle to something I said earlier, I would say that probably was the beginning of my like appreciation for just programming, right? Like I'm going to put good things in my head. I'm going to put good things in there because God knows there's not a lot of good things going on in there naturally.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
are bad.
yeah. I mean, like I think that thoughts are not your friend for the most part. So I think that those advanced sales tapes, man, I came across some of those in storage the other day, and I was finally able to throw away my pre-approach pads, which took me 20 years, but I was not able to discard the advanced sales tapes. Those were, I got a lot of mileage out of those for sure.
Hell yeah. I love that. I love Bill Zizzy too. And then she gave me $900.
$900.
So good. So good. Roger Sipes is so good. Honestly, it's funny because we've had some of those like legendary advanced sales people on the show. Trey George, Roger Sipes, Roger Smith, Todd McWhorter. Yeah, some really good ones. And it's like to hear them, like you hear their voices so much that you can pick them out on a recording, because you've just heard them over and over and over, and then you hear him talking in front of you. You're like, oh my God, this is the same guy.
Right.
Right. Dave Rosen was on our show, and we're like, oh my God, he's still got the same voice.
You're the guy. Hey, do the thing. Do the thing.
Yeah,
do the part.
You're like, Billy, get over here.
Right.
Just for our soundbite, just so we can own it. That's awesome. Do you remember the biggest maybe not in a negative way, but like just you were just appalled at like how big the rejection was by that you were just like, I cannot believe that I just got told no like this. And it wasn't even personal. You're just like, wow, it's a new sense of asshole that I've never smelled before.
So back to, I mean, you got me thinking before about the whole HOA. So my third summer was my first summer selling in like big brick, and it was all kind of recent. So it was like the worst of both worlds, big brick,
New
and then
money.
also
Yeah.
new money. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And you know, brand new neighborhoods, I mean, at the time, I don't know, I probably couldn't guess how home values as a whatever 21-year-old, but probably in the, I don't know, 500 to 700,000 range, you know, then. So
Which
whatever,
back then was a
probably
ton. Yeah, you say that in
for sure.
Portland,
Yeah.
and it's a 2-bedroom with 1,000 square
Yeah,
feet. But yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And this is in suburban, you know, Detroit. So,
Michigan.
yeah, so probably whatever, 2 or 3 times that value now. But yes, I just remember, I remember kind of the experience that you just described of like no, you know, we've heard of you, and we're not interested. And so that's probably what set off that paranoia of everyone's watching and nobody wants to talk to you. So I did my best to follow the coaching of, you know, don't turf hop and just, you know, go to the next house. But there were some days where the paranoia got the best of me, and I had to pop over to a different neighborhood where I was fresh. I could move freely without being detected.
Yeah, those are hard. I mean, the biggest lesson I learned from that, I had that same problem my second summer. I told this on the show before, but I sold in Andover, Massachusetts, North Andover and Andover, where it's the school called Phillips Exeter Andover area. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a private school, 50 grand to go to school there a year. And
Yep.
so like, holy shit. So giant houses. And it's so intimidating. But the key to those is if you get some names rolling, oh baby, like if you get a good name,
Oh yeah.
a cop, a teacher, principal,
Yep.
oh, otherwise don't even try. Like it's just you're gonna just it's futile. So that was the only way I found around that. But other than that, rich neighborhoods like that, brand new money like that, I'm like, oh man, they're gonna the Browns
That's funny.
game.
So
I got
so
asked
you
if I wanted
mentioned,
to mow their yard. There's people that are like, hey, you want to mow my yard? Make more
right.
money than you're making now. And I'm like, fuck you. Like, jeez. I'm not even mad. That's such a good burn.
Right.
God.
Right.
Oy.
It sounds like the territory. I actually flew out. I never sold in Northeast, but I actually flew out to follow Kaya Grady at the time, in the field. I want to say that was my I think it was my third summer actually that I did that, and that was quite the experience for sure.
What was she like?
You know, it's funny. I mean, this is something that that is true of most top performers that I've had a chance to, you know, to be around in the insurance space as well. Is, you know, most top performers are not the most technically sound, you know, salespeople. In other words, if you were to, you know, write out a transcript just on paper, right, of what they actually say, it's not as though you're going to see the secret. And I think that's kind of an entry level version of I'm gonna get the secret phrase, right? I'm gonna get that one liner that's just gonna turn everything into into nothing but
Here's how
yeses.
they close.
Yeah, for
That's so
sure. Yeah. But her expectation and belief level was like nothing I'd ever seen before. You know, and I suppose I was mature enough in the business after whatever 3 summers to be able to recognize like, oh, it's not so much about, and don't get me wrong, her demo was, you know, fantastic. But it wasn't the best I'd ever seen. You know what I mean? But her mindset and her expectation around every single house that I walk up to, expecting them to buy the whole bag, I was like, oh, got it. This is a mindset game, way more than it is a who's the best,
Yeah.
you know, salesperson kind of. Apparently, this is my salesperson move. But who's the best? You know, yeah, jazz hands. Turns out not necessary when it comes to selling.
Believe it or not.
But
Wow.
it's a mindset thing. It's an expectation thing, you know, and so that was super, you know, transformational and helpful for me to see that and then be able to, you know, do my best version to apply that. Yeah.
Giant. And that kind of tunes into what we were talking about before we started recording with like Mark Norman and like Louis C.K. and Dave Chappelle, where it's like Mark Norman would be like you, where it was like, I mean, I'm sound, but how come I'm not selling, And then
Mhm.
those guys, it's when you raise it to an art form, and the
Yeah.
only way to raise it to that art form is by believing in yourself. And then that and thus turns into like believing in what you're doing, right? Or
Well,
vice
and
versa.
having
I don't know.
I mean, this is kind of more of a holistic topic as well, but just having the confidence to be wrong, right? Like, anything about comedy, right? Like, comedy is a series of risks, and you got to take risks to get laughs. And it doesn't always work, right? I mean, like, that's
No.
one thing that, and you've experienced this, right? Like, I mean, how many times
A
did you
couple
bomb? How
times.
many things that you were sure were funny that you then, tried to work out that completely, fell flat, right? So
Yeah.
it's a matter of taking risks and realizing, again, back to that sort of, macro confidence as opposed to, the micro confidence, right? That something's going to work out, of just understanding that, yeah, more things are not going to work than those, which do. Most of the things that I'm going to do in the studio when we get done here aren't going to work. In fact, I might do, of all the marks, that I make in the studio after this, it's entirely possible that none of them are going to be seen by anybody in any of my pieces. They could all not work. And if that's the case, I'm gonna drive home tonight and be like, crap, wasted day. I suck. But it's that macro, faith, that macro confidence that a series of mistakes, a series of failures actually is what ultimately leads to success. That's one of those things that I think for me, the book business either gave me or certainly set in motion for me from a mindset and mentality perspective.
Brilliant. Heck yeah, man. That was good. That was good. That story about following Kaya. See, those are like not ponytails, but those are good stories.
Yeah.
Now, my friend. Now, my friend, we have arrived at the ponytails. So this could be one or two stories. It could be one big one small one. I don't care. It's your microphone. I'm gonna do a quick shout out really quick to a couple last friends here that we are talking about. Hey guys, go to our ponytails pod. It's called the ponytailspodcast.com. Go check out our merch. Go check out our newsletter. Please sign up. It's called The Cult. We created a newsletter called The Cult, baby. Go check it out and make sure you sign up for that. It comes out once a month. It's going to tell you about what's going on here at the show. But our website was designed by VDisain. Thank you guys for that. If you guys are looking for people who can revamp your website and give you a more professional look, possibly, reach out to us. We'll put you in touch with VDisain. They did it for us. Big quick shout out to EnLight.Energy. They're doing some great stuff in the solar industry, making a lot of moves in different markets throughout the country. If you're interested in going into that, one sale every other week in that is going to make you six figures. So that's pretty exciting. We can get you to join Julio Hernandez and Alexander Black for that. And then last shout out once again to our friends, man, over at Cardinal Benefits. Once again, their average work week is about 31 to 34 hours, and some of their top performers are earning about 12 to 15,000 per week of gross profit just doing that. So if you are curious about how to make that kind of money, they are looking to expand. They've grown and doubled in growth every single year for the last 4 years. So they're on it again. If you or someone you know is interested in that job, please reach out to us. We'll get you in touch with them. You get a $500 referral bonus, even if it wasn't for you. But you referred your friends. So make sure to click on our link below or just message us. We'll get you in touch. But now, time for some ponytails. You back, baby. Man, that
I'm
was a good
back.
time. Boom, 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 boom. Good stuff. All right, my man. So the microphone is yours. Again, this could be any sort of story. It could be a wild, could be crazy, inspiring, whatever. But the choice is yours. It could be, again, multiple stories. It could be one big one. You let me know. And please.
I got one that comes to mind. I mean, this is like my go-to like book story. If I'm, telling, I got one. I don't know how good it is, but it's the only one I really got that I've spent any time telling since then. But it was my third summer. No, that's not true. It was my fourth summer. I was in Cleveland, Ohio, and I was working some bigger brick, like Brecksville, Broadview Heights. If anybody knows, I don't know, I'm lifting territories, but nicer area. And I remember it was about midsummer. Actually, it was pretty late in the summer, and I had some good weeks, but it was just one of those weeks where like nothing was working, and I'm sitting on, I think I had probably hit, mort a couple of times in previous weeks, and I'm sitting on like I don't know, let's say 150 units, on a Wednesday, just being like, well, this is it. I forgot how to sell. It's never going to work again. And so I did something that we're explicitly coached not to do, and I just turf hopped. I said, "F it, I'm out of here. I'm just gonna go drive. I'm gonna drive straight east, and I'm just gonna get out and I'm gonna find a little town, and I'm just gonna take a break. Of course, I'm gonna keep working, but I'm gonna have a little midsummer vacation in a small little town that no one's working." And so I called my org leader and I was like, "Hey, or not org leader, I forget the titles because I never raised up the
DSM.
Sure, let's go with that." So it was look at you with the buttons, just all ready to rock and roll. So the DSM at the time was Travis Wilson. So when I switched to the University of Minnesota, I kind of switched organizations. So anyway, so I called Travis and I was like, "Hey, where do I got to go? How far do I got to go to find a little town that is not being worked or anybody's territory?" Turns out it was like 45 minutes east, and I was like, "Fine, whatever. I'm just gonna take a little few days, have a nice long drive in the morning, listen to my whatever."
To Bill Suzy.
That's right. Yeah, and get there. So what I found was just this perfect little honey hole, like this lovely little community. I can't remember the name of it to save my life, but probably, I don't know, 11, 1,200 people, had its own small little school district. Everybody knew everybody. I got 3 names on my names list, and everybody was like, "Oh yeah, we know." Just everything perfect, right? Spread out houses, those nice mature trees that I was talking about, little ice cream shop in the middle of the little town square that I could hit on the way home, like perfect.
Great. That's the ideal town.
Totally. Yeah.
That's some good territory.
That was some good turf. And so it was Amish country, right? So in the country, lot of Amish. And so I was having a nice solid. So I ended up working there for probably 2.5 weeks altogether before it just dried up and I had to go back to a reasonable distance from my HQ. But it was a Saturday, and I had a really good week cooking. Had somebody following me, and we were just striking out, right? Like just couldn't buy a sale to save our lives. It's probably 2 or 3 in the afternoon on a Saturday, and I'm trying to close out a big week and keep a little whatever Mort Street going. And I remember just being so frustrated driving past a house that I knew was Amish. And for those of you that haven't sold books, not the best prospects. Typically didn't buy educational books that were geared around the traditional school system. So that's whatever. But I saw all of these buggies and just a ton of people gathered in this front yard underneath the shade, having a picnic, having a community gathering. And so I said, "We're gonna have some fun today. We might not sell very many books, but we're gonna have some fun today." And so I was frustrated. I was pissed off. So I was like, "Screw it! Like this is gonna be the thing that I accomplished today, even if it's not selling anything." So I parked at the very end of the driveway, and I said, "Come with me." And she said, "What?" I said, "Just try and keep up." And so I got my book bag, and I said, I'm going full send on this. Like I'm going to commit, and I'm going to make an absolute fool of myself. And if nothing else, this girl who's following me is going to have a story to tell. And here I am telling the story. So I guess it worked out for at least at least me. So full sprint.
If it doesn't work out, they can't call anybody.
That's right. So I'm going down, so full send down this really big yard, tree lined, driveway, and I'm just going for it. And I decide, the trip approach, right? We all heard about it.
Yeah.
And so I'm like,
actually covered this.
No one's talked about the trip approach?
So. I don't think.
Oh my goodness. 150 some guests and no one's talked about the classic trip approach.
So good.
All right. So sub story, the trip approach is a classic. I don't recall who taught it to me, but it's basically just how dumb can you make yourself look to be able to laugh at yourself, get them laughing at you, have a little moment, and then say, "Oh, by the way, do you have a place we can sit down?" And I can show you how these books work, right? And there's different versions of it, of course, but that was the trip approach. So you basically in this case, I consciously decided that my right foot was going to catch, my left foot while planted, and that I was going to do a full head first, trying to stretch a double into a triple slide, into third base. And even beforehand, I prepped it, right? So like made sure that my book bag was open so that it was all gonna went for it, right? Got close enough. And there were probably, it was a big community gathering. I'm going to say, 80 to 100, people just all sitting around, just, whatever, mid-afternoon, lunch was already done, but hanging out, spending time. Did the full send, right? So I go for it. I just downhill, had some good momentum going, tripped. The book, every book goes every which way. I slide head first. I decided like this polo shirt might not, it was on its last legs anyway. This shirt might not make it to tomorrow. That's okay, right? So full send, right? Slide, get up, grass stains. And I was like, I'm going to sell this. I'm going to make it look as authentic as possible. So I fall down, nice green grass. It wasn't injured at all, but of course I'm trying to collect myself. I go around, I pick up all my books, and then I just kind of stood there. And I don't know what reaction I was expecting. It was really more for the girl who was following me and for myself than it was for them. So I didn't really have a plan or an expected response in mind. But I remember it was one of the senior members of the group, right? Nice. And he's got this, long white beard. And one of my books had fallen. Let's go with that. Yep. Had fallen at his feet. And I remember he looked and he stroked his beard, and it felt like forever. Probably it was 2 seconds. But I kind of start to smile, and he lets out the biggest, most genuine belly guttural laugh that I'd ever heard in my entire life. And when he started to do it, then I started laughing, and then everybody just cracked up like, hey, this guy's not a threat. He's okay. It's okay to laugh. When somebody does that, like, oh, are they hurt? Cool. Is it okay to laugh? Like, all right, it's okay to laugh. JYD started laughing, right? And so it ended up being this, hilarious, everyone's cracking up and laughing. And of course I did my best approach, which didn't go anywhere, but they were kind enough to give us some food and send us on our way. So that was my intentionally embarrassing, story.
Yes. That's a great ponytail right there, sir. That's great. We had, and it's a trip approach in I could be wrong. 150 episodes, maybe somebody brought it up, but this is the first ponytail trip approach infused story that we've ever had. So record set.
Hey, listen, self-deprecating humor works every time.
Oh, that's so good, man. That's so good. Oh man. Oh, there's if you guys want to know, there's an episode with I think Darta Solita. She sold 13,000 units in Ohio, only sold to Amish people.
It's certainly possible.
She figured out a way to do it. Nobody's like 13,000 units straight on that. She was the number one experience.
I never cracked that code. Incredible people.
Crazy. Me either.
To be sure, like some of the best people you ever hope to talk to, but I never figured out how to sell. I never figured out how to sell in the Amish communities.
By on a Friday afternoon after you'd done, because you'd open turf until Friday night, and then all Saturday was gravy, and you'd go back to a different part of your turf. So you never. I remember driving by Friday afternoon on my way to start gravy on Friday night, and they were like starting to build a house, and then I drove back on Monday to restart breaking that turf, and the house was built, bro.
Yeah,
dude, crazy.
You walk by like a barn raising, like you talk about real community. You'd be hard pressed to find a better example.
Better than that, yeah. And honestly, maybe they definitely know something we don't when it comes to like getting along and getting people to settle differences and just work together, even though they're not all the same.
100%. Right now, as I sit here, I have no idea what my girls are consuming on, TikTok or Snapchat, but they don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, they know something we don't, for sure.
No doubt.
Oh man. Well, 2 hours and 18 minutes in, can you believe it? We did it. We've arrived.
I love it.
Bro, this has been a privilege and an honor to have you on here. And thank you so much for being so open and for sharing so much about your life. You are inspiring in a lot of ways, and you are like such a cool version of confident and humble at the same time.
Hmm.
I feel like a lot of people should try to strive for this. So I hope if you guys got a lot of this episode, thank you so much for listening. Let us know if you want to reach out to Nathan. Just make sure you guys go to his Instagram. That's at Nathan Terborg. That's Terb, or not Treeborg, not like tree, but Terborg.
That's right.
If you're
You got
only
it.
listening, so it's Nathan, like Nathan, and then Terborg, or you can just go check out the episode notes and stuff. You can see it there. We'll probably put the link and stuff there too. If you have a website too where your art's at, let us know or send it to me, and I can also put it in the episode notes. But for now, this has been our episode. Thank you so much, guys, for listening. My name is Andres Gamboa. Thank you for letting me be the host of the show. And we look forward to some more guests here in the future. You guys have a good evening. Nathan, my man, thank you so much. You are awesome, sir. Peace out,
Cheers. Thank you.
everybody.